Okay, we seem to be here. I'm not actually sure how well this is working right now. Well, it's still, I got a notification that I'm live. This is actually the first time I live stream on this channel. I'm doing it so spontaneously that I'm afraid I missed a few steps by changing my account in OBS. But I see May's already here. This will be fun. Let's hope so. Jesus Christ. Anybody here? Well, I don't actually expect a lot of people anyway. I'm kind of live streaming it, but I would still be doing a clipped version of it to upload on my channel afterwards. But this is very spontaneous. Yeah, your voice and video works. Perfect. Okay. I don't seem to be seeing any lags either. Okay, so I'm just going to be doing this as a live stream as if I have like a large audience. And then when I have the clip, we'll do that. Okay, so capture moments as they happen. Dude, stop giving me stuff to do. Okay, I just announced it. It's very last minute. But okay, so let's do this. Let me try and figure out an intro here. Okay, so Metatron. We all know Metatron here, right? If you watch this channel, you probably do. I have been an open critic of Metatron for a while now, and one thing that's always fascinated me is how he responds to other people. Obviously, he won't respond to me. One time he said it's because I was too small of a channel and he didn't want to gang up on me with his audience. But he's also said in that same comment, which I've showed before, that he will not actually respond to me anyway. He straight up said that even if I was bigger, he would not respond to me because I called him a grifter, which I think is not very very honest. Bye, Electris just showed up. Hi, Terry. I love your Mutton Blade videos. Well, thank you, man. If you enjoy a bit of politics too, this is what this second channel is about, and we're about to go over a video by a favorite YouTuber of mine. I say that sarcastically. So anyway, not long ago, there's been this other guy, much bigger than me, Fredda, 119,000 subscribers. Over a month ago, he made a video essentially sharing his own take on some of the people that I've been criticizing, namely Metatron, but he's also went, as you see, against Lindy Beige, which, I'll be honest, I never actually knew who he was until I watched that video, and Shediversity, who is basically Metatron without the veneer of enlightened moderate, you know. He's an open far-right conservative. He's got like a separate channel, Night's Watch, I believe, where he does a lot of woke stuff. And anyway, this is, without a doubt, to my knowledge, one of the biggest videos taking down Metatron that I've seen pop up. Most of the time, it's relatively small channels like mine, or people who come from other communities. There was a community of Afrocentrists that had their own beef with Metatron for a while. I talked with one of them a few weeks ago. There was also Bad Empanada, and Bad Empanada is somewhat known, I guess, in the left community, but a lot of times for all the wrong reasons. But he also went against Metatron a few months ago. That was fun. Then there was Alec Gunter, but Alec Gunter is also pretty small. But this guy, this was a pretty big video. It was really well made, and it kind of shown. Yeah, and even the big channels do it. It's often low effort live reactions. Exactly. So there's that too. And one of the things that really stands out about this video is that it kind of encompasses, although briefly I would say, a lot of some of the broader criticisms of Metatron, from how he actually does history to the biases that go into it. But I will say there's a lot more that could be said, but the main problem with this video when it comes to specifically targeting Metatron is that it's just one of three. He spends 20 minutes on Metatron and then he moves on to the next. But anyway, Metatron had said a while ago that he was going to respond to this video. Actually, May, who is in the live chat right now, has said that, has actually sent me a clip of him in one of his live streams a few weeks ago. I remember specifically, like, he was asked about Fredda, and he said that he would respond, but that in the way he would respond, he considered like the possibility of going over Fredda's entire channel. He just said that. He says like, he's on my radar, I might make a response, but if I do, I'll try and go like over Fredda's channel. Which to me really sounded like he was saying like, I'm going to go against Fredda's character. I'm going to try and find the odd thing out that Fredda might have said. And he might actually, try and attack his character. Now, when it comes to Metatron's video, which is right here, as you see, I was at the 10-minute mark. We're going to start it over. I started watching this video an hour ago, and as some people will say, like in my own Discord server, this is a complete meltdown so far. I don't know what else is going to come up in that video, but it is embarrassingly low effort, I would say. It is extremely disingenuous. Even by Metatron standards, like, this is a new low. I don't know what happened. I don't know what he was thinking when he made that video, but as you'll see as we start it, it's going to be quite of a ride. So you're going to get my live reaction, basically, and if you're in the chat right now, apparently there's 8 people in here, which really surprises me. If there's other people, don't be shy, say hi. But we're gonna go over the video, and full disclosure, when it comes to Fredda, like, outside of that one video he made on Metatron, I didn't know who he was until then, and I didn't get around to watching any of his other content. But that shouldn't matter. We're going to get into that because from the first 10 minutes, Metatron, like, really goes hard against Fredda's character, which is very unbecoming of Metatron. Like, even for him, like, this is really intense. But anyway, so I think we'll start, and then we'll just see what happens.
Leave, Rico.
Okay, already, like, an embarrassing meme. This is pretty bad, but what I really like is you can see the movieclips.com in the reverse right here. Like, he just went and grabbed this clip from, I believe it's, damn it, The Crow? Yeah, it's The Crow. And he just grabbed it on Movie Clips, and for what? You know, Jesus Christ.
Take your shot, fun boy. You got me dead bang.
Take your shot, Freddy boy. You got me dead bang.
Alright. Hey, noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Met.
Okay, what was that? Like, he kind of just cut the joke. You know, I think one recurrent theme throughout this video is I'm going to try not to interrupt every now and then, but like, what was that? He's just sitting there, faking a chuckle, as if he knows that, like, he's gonna have his voiceover in the back, and he's like, oh, Freddy boy. What is this? Like, this the only good thing in the video? Jesus.
Metatron speaking, and apparently we got a video dedicated to me, and 2 more guys that I've never seen before.
I swear, officer, they're medicinal.
Shad has already posted his response video
Okay.
today, same time as me. You'll find a link in the description and pinned comment. Go check it out after you're done with this. Oh, who made this? I'm glad you asked.
So that was the intro, and Kunina just started with like, okay, like, hello everyone, let's talk about this video that someone made about me and get straight to the point, because but that wasn't fun. Okay, this is something that I actually want to point to. Content of the video. So Metatron does a lot of that in his video essays, and you don't have to read each message aloud. You can just quietly read some and comment on the ones you think are worth commenting on. 2016 era of video editing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have to comment on all of them, but as soon as I see a message, I kind of read it out loud. I gotta work on that. But anyway, so this is something that Metatron does a lot, and on the surface, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to point out that it's a thing that he does, because then he criticizes Fredda for doing the same thing. So when you make a argumentative video, I mean, I can't even say like an argumentative video. Like, what I'm talking about is something I learned in high school. When you make an argumentative essay, how do you do it? Usually you have an intro, what you're going to be talking about, and you make a claim. This would be the synopsis, although synopsis is not technically the right term for this. A synopsis is like summing up a movie. But then you have the intro, and then from there you make arguments to substantiate the claim that you just made. Keep that in mind.
Fredda is a 24-year-old YouTuber from Norway who makes videos about history and gaming. As of the making of this video, his social media presence is 2 YouTube channels, X, Blue Sky, Twitch and Patreon. Alright, before I click, what do we think, guys? What do we think? Respectful, honest, decent, no logical fallacies, no ad hominem attacks, fair, balanced? It's in the channel description, right? So this video is gonna be fine, right?
It's not fine.
Someone really needs to tell Metatron that he's not funny. Like, I'm not just saying that because, like, obviously we vehemently disagree with each other and I've come to despise him because of some of his content. This is not funny. Can we stop doing that, please?
Let's look at his channel more closely. Quote, I try to hold myself to certain levels of decorum and respect, openness and general quality. As I will demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt, this is a lie. Ironically, this is...
I'm just gonna say, again, one of the things that Metatron really did not like about me is I called him a liar. And now he's just out here calling everyone else liars like it's nothing. Like, he literally said on video, like, people who call me a liar, they are the weakest intellectually. So what does that say about you, Metatron?
going to be a recurring pattern, by the way, with Fredda. Spoiler alert, I guess.
When I was younger, like most teenagers who were into fantasy and history, I was also into medieval history, because it had knights and swords and all that cool stuff.
Me too.
In terms of actually learning about this stuff, I didn't really have much of an idea where to start. Enter youtube.com. The early algorithm and my more sword and HEMA-obsessed friends very quickly started serving me videos from seemingly knowledgeable individuals talking directly into a camera and occasionally showing off their swords. Then, as I began my undergraduate studies and started learning more not just about history but also about how history is written, I started getting bored with these videos, verging on actively disliking some of them. I started noticing that a lot of the channels often relied heavily on rationalization and logic, not on evidence or sources.
This is a misrepresentation. All we do on this channel is use the sources. Of course.
Okay, this is what I mean right there. Without having like the structure clearly planned out, this what Metatron does with like a structure of like synopsis and part 1, part 2, part 5, this is exactly what Fredda is doing here. This is just a generic intro over what he's going to be talking about. And that's it. So it's like, of course, you know, he's in the process of making that claim, and then afterwards, he will start making arguments to substantiate it. But Metatron is so quick here to try and discredit Fredda that he doesn't even give him a chance. Like, imagine I start my video, and it's like a 30-minute long video, and the first 30 seconds I say, yeah, you know, like, I have a lot of problems with Metatron, and he cuts me out like, well, show me. Show me, what's the problem, huh? Show me. If you don't show me, you're a liar. This is a manipulation. You gotta let the people talk. You gotta let them get to that point. He's just presenting his first claim, and then he's gonna move on. And the other problem here is that it also shows how Metatron is full of himself, because remember, the video is about 3 different people. When he's making those brown messages, he's talking about 3 different YouTubers. What makes you think that he's explicitly talking about you? Just because you're the first person he covers doesn't mean that the intro isn't about all 3 of you. It's pretty simple.
Of course, we also use reason and logic. He's correct about that, and there is nothing wrong with it. However, we read the ancient texts, usually in the original language, and have constantly actively discouraged people from using rationalization alone and to rely on the primary sources, material goods, literary, and all other forms of
Okay, so one thing to also quickly mention about that, like, what if we just use the exact same logic of Metatron against him right here? Okay, you just said that you use the primary sources. Where are the sources? Show me the sources. You just said you do. You just said you use them. Where are they? Show me. Where are they? That's what this is. And also, I want to point out, this is a recurrent criticism of Metatron and one that is absolutely fair. Maybe he'll actually do it here. So you have like a quick... Where are the sources? You see any sources here? I don't. Are there any sources? Like, what's he citing? There's nothing here. There's this Patreon link. There's this plushie. There's the video that Chad also did. Is that Italian for grandmother? The point is, like, you can... Let's grab any other video that Metatron did. Like, I know sometimes he still does, like, these essays, or at least I hear
Hello,
of
number
it.
ones. Welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking,
stop.
and welcome to part 2 of this fantastic audio.
YouTube is really bad. I'm not even on the homepage anymore and it's already doing this. So, The Origins of the Celts, a deep dive into Celtic ethnogenesis. So he's going to be talking about the ethnogenesis of the Celts. I might get... He's got a bunch of links. Okay, so the sources might be this here? Maybe? Where are the sources? Like, maybe he cites them in the video, but there's no way here. He's got a link for his plushie, he's got his other previous videos on the Romans and whatever. There's no link here. You're not citing any of your sources, man. Like, ever. And this is the same thing that some other people say. Like, one of the big talking points of Metatron for a while has been like, oh, it's not just me. I have a team of academics that peer review my work. Who are your peers? What's their contribution? Are they credited? Do they have social media links we can follow? Do they show their sources? Yeah, exactly. These aren't sources because I'm reading so quickly. It's just a definition of words. Yeah. Peoples from Greek and Roman authors. Like, yeah. So there's no sources whatsoever. So what the hell are you talking about? He puts that in the description so he can get as many keywords in for the algorithm. Is that even a thing? That, like, the more stuff you have in your description, like, the more it pushes you in the algorithm or something? I mean, that'd be interesting. That'd be the first time I learned. But the point is, why are you accusing someone of not showing their sources, and in the process of accusing them of that, you don't show your sources, and then we go on your channel and you don't show your sources? Anyway. Whoops. What's going on? Why did it unmute it?
Causing, for example, the collapse of the kingdom of
Content
would
would
have
have
during
Oh
the
my
New
God.
Kingdom
This is horrible. Okay. We got
revealed
it.
that fact. The funny thing is that I can already imagine you shaking your head.
Okay.
Liking some of them. I started noticing that a lot of the channels often relied heavily on rationalization and logic, not on evidence or sources.
This is a misrepresentation. All we do on this channel is use the sources. Of course, we also use reason and logic, he's correct about that, and there is nothing wrong with it. However, we read the ancient texts, usually in the original language, and have constantly actively discouraged people from using rationalization alone and to rely on the primary sources, material goods, literary and all other forms of evidence.
Okay, well, again, as we just saw, like, we went over one of his recent videos, there's nothing.
Even a cursory look at my content would have
I literally just did a cursory search, and there's nothing.
revealed that fact. The funny thing is that I can already imagine you shaking your head, because you already know this. Thus, it begs the question, is he misinformed?
It's funny because I remember Fredda in his video accuses Metatron of doing what he just did, which is where he's trying to appeal to his audience preconceived notion. He's like, well, surely right now you are like going like this, no, like this is stupid because you already know that Fredda is wrong, but we have to talk about it anyway. He's literally doing the same thing again.
Or was this on purpose?
You might hear them say something like, if they did X, then Y would happen. That doesn't make much sense, so they probably did Z. It's all argumentation and deduction based on what they believe, their preconceived notions, and their experiences.
Provide a clip where I said that, please.
This approach to history can very quickly become problematic for many different reasons, but with these YouTubers I think something unique starts to happen. When these so-called
And again, this is what I mean. He's making a broad statement, and he will follow it up with clips. The communist bit will be amazing, greatest hit piece on his channel. I look forward to it. But he's doing it right now. Oh, show me clips. Show me clips of doing that. There's two problems. First, he's still making his first claim that he will then be substantiating later. So he's not obligated to show clips yet. And you expecting him to do so is bad faith, like straight up. And also, again, he's talking about 3 different YouTubers. So right now, he could be talking about Chad, he could be talking about Lady Beige, or he could be talking about you. But to assume that just because he doesn't show any clips, and to presume he's just talking about you, again, what are you doing? This is purely dishonest.
they teach doesn't have to be backed up or justified by its connection to the sources, and when their personal experience takes primacy, then they start to believe themselves to be far more knowledgeable and qualified than they actually are.
Now, there is a lot to unpack here, including the obvious gatekeeping attempt. I'll get back to this later because I want you to focus on the next sentence. All of this, it's incorrect, but it's a build-up to the lie. Watch.
They begin to quote-unquote reason themselves towards every answer. And for some reason, the end result of this development almost always looks like an hour-long video essay about why women don't belong in video games.
Alright, so what do we have here? A statement, but no clip to prove it. Massive red flag. So allegedly...
I mean, I'm gonna repeat it. It's not a massive red flag. He's making a general claim, and then he will substantiate it. But again, you know who in that trio spends a lot of time complaining about the woke and women in video games and women in literature and in movies? Shad does. So the claim is perfectly fine, even in that case, and he probably goes into some of that stuff like Fredda towards the end of his video. I don't remember. But that's the point.
My position is that women don't belong in video games. I've never made a video like that, ever. See, that's the problem. After a charged statement like this, what he should be doing, if he was intellectual...
Again, he didn't actually say Metatron believes women don't belong in video games. He said, they complain about women in video games, and that could include Shad or anyone else. It's not just about you, but by paraphrasing it like this, you're already completely misframing the first claim that was made. It's like you can't even let him go 2 minutes without automatically trying to fight everything he does, because again, the whole point here is to completely discredit Fredda before the argument actually comes, so that way his Metatron's audience will not take anything he says at face value.
Honest, is producing a clip to substantiate the claim, where I say this, but he can't do it, because I don't hold that position, nor have I ever complained about women in video games, ever. He made it up. It's a lie. Alright, I've just given you a preview of how this entire video is. Now, apart from the appeal and views that drama videos make, one ends up asking, why would he make such a video?
Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video. Surfshark provides a
To be more specific, what he's trying to do is call...
What was that? What was that? Are you saying that the only reason he made that video was for the sponsorship? You realize he could have made a video on anything without it being about a sponsorship. And what are you doing trying to assess this guy's inner motivations? What proof do you have? Like, just because he has a sponsorship means that's the reason he made the video? My god.
Poisoning the well. The idea behind this
What are you doing, Metatron, right now, if not poisoning the well? My god.
manipulation tactic is that in argumentation, it means contaminating your opponent's credibility before you address their points, so that anything that they say afterwards is viewed with suspicion or outright dismissed by your audience.
Again, how is that not exactly what Metatron is doing with Fredda for his audience? He is poisoning the well. What's happened so far? Fredda hasn't made a single claim directly aimed at Metatron yet, and yet he's already been called a liar, he's already been accused of making claims without showing any sources or clips, and he's been accused of only doing it for the money. Terry is recording this live reaction because he has headphones, as evidenced by the fact that he has headphones. Exactly. It's like, it's circular nonsense.
But please, go on.
The plan here is to revisit 3 channels that I watched something like a decade ago, those being Lindy Beige, Metatron, and Shadiversity, to see where they are now and try to figure out what's going on with them.
Skipping ahead to the sponsored section, but don't forget to use code Fredda. Might as well call it code liar.
That's a pure ad hominem. By your own logic, Metatron, there is nothing about what you just said here that is contributing to the discourse in any way. This is beyond childish. You should be embarrassed, man. What is this? If someone had done that to you, you would have already, lost your mind over it. My god.
Back to the medievalists. First up, Metatron. Luckily, he has provided us with a perfect Rorschach test to figure out his politics and understanding of history.
Now, this sentence caught my attention. I think finally, after a veritable cornucopia of lies and manipulation attempts, I think Fredda may have accidentally told the truth. That's what this is all about. He doesn't look at the historical statement and then use the sources to validate or counter the creator's position. He first tries to figure out my politics, and then he acts accordingly. This is a confession. Well, how about we figure out his politics? On his X account,
See, okay, so we're gonna have to talk about this, but because we know that's what he's going to do now. He's just gonna try and poorly frame Fredda by suggesting that because he has certain politics that makes him wrong. This is something I talked about in my conversation with Black like 2-3 weeks ago, but everybody has biases. It's not so much a question of whether you... I'm going to put in the big screen right now for that one, because why not? Everybody has biases. It's not a question of whether you have a bias, it's whether the bias that you have is leading you to make wrong assessments. In the case of Metatron, you can go on my channel, and this is the main criticism. As I've said multiple times, even if Metatron, like, you know, it's revealed that, like, he's actually much further to the right than he lets on, in of itself, I don't care. What I care about is the value of the argument and whether what you're saying is even correct. My issue with Shad isn't so much that he's far right, it's that he's wrong. Like, a lot of the things he says is complete nonsense. I disagree with his takes on AI, and that's all there is to it. In the case of Metatron, it has led him to completely misframes a lot of different things, starting from the fact that because he has a bias against the Woman King, he made an entire video without watching it. So it's not inherently because he didn't watch the movie that he's wrong, it's his bias that led him to make a review without watching it. And that's the same thing. So irrespective of what Fredda's politics are here, what really matters is, does he make valid arguments? And we're going to get into that, I presume. But the point is, if you can prove that because he has those politics, that's why he's wrong, then okay. But I don't get the impression that that's what we're going to get.
Read. Marx had some ideas, with a picture of a gulag in the background. I swear you can't make this shit up.
And, okay, so let's actually look at that picture, okay? So there is a gulag. What else is there? There is a Kermit, and then there's a picture here violating our rules against violent speech. That seems to be Fredda here, who may have said that, and like he's been blocked at some point. So my only impression from this is that this is just one big edgy joke. Maybe he is a tanky, maybe he's a Marxist, but I really don't care. Like, this idea, like, Marx had some ideas. Okay, yeah. He's just saying whatever, you know? History person and YouTube men who actually cite sources. That's what should really matter here. It's whether that's what he does. Who cares if he's a Marxist? It's really because it's Fredda over here, but this image is giving me an impression that this is actually a joke about Jordan Peterson. You know, there was a point where Jordan Peterson, like, he was banned from Twitter because he had said some transphobic stuff, and he was talking about how this is authoritarian and he would rather die than defend himself. And Kermit is usually a reference to Jordan Peterson because they talk the same. You know, so maybe that's what it is, but I have no idea.
On ProleWiki, the communist-Leninist version of Wikipedia, yeah, that's a thing, comrade. His ideology is listed as communist.
Yeah, and Mayu says, like, that's the joke. It's condemning the gulag in the context. Yeah, basically, it's like, oh no, like, Twitter censored me. I'm being sent to the gulag. It's like, that's a joke. But anyway, what is he saying here?
Of Wikipedia, yeah, that's a thing, comrade. His ideology is listed as communism, Marxism. Well, will you look at that? I did notice an unusually high number of tankies in my comment section lately. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe there is a relation there. What do you think, detective? Any causal links? To be fair, the guy is far left, so I'd say far right, moderate conservatives, centrists, moderate left, liberals, libertarians...
Again, he's still putting himself in the center here, which is ridiculous. But he also still puts, like, you know, Marxist-Leninism in the far left, which, like, I've come to concede that authoritarian leftism is a thing. Like, there's a lot of people who actually advocate in that sense. But again, it doesn't matter. For context, ProleWiki is written by jobless losers who have nothing to do with Fredda or many of the YouTubers they make pages about. There's that too. Like, just because a wiki makes a page about you doesn't really mean that it says anything. But the fact is, he's just trying to make it seem like, you know, like you all get the bullet. Like, Jesus Christ. It's a third-party source that provides no evidence for its claim. And I mean, it's just a random wiki. Lots of people make fan wikis. It doesn't mean anything. And again, I don't care to the extent that Fredda is making actual decent arguments here. Even if he has, like, certain views, which we don't even know. Like, I would not trust Metatron on any of this framing. I would have to look it up myself, but it doesn't matter. It's all about the arguments. What's the argument?
progressives, we are all his enemies anyways, so he has plenty of choice. See, that's the difference between someone like me. If it's nonsense, I debunk it, and if
I also hate this idea that Metatron is being like, oh, you know, like, hold up, left-wingers got offended, right-wingers got offended. Most of his audience is right-wingers. Like, this is just, like, constantly trying to make this whole thing about, like, oh, you know, I offend both sides. Like, he doesn't.
it's correct, I'll say it. Regardless of the political positions the person making the statements has. In other words, I first look at the info and the validity thereof on their own merit. Then, if it's relevant, I look at the politics of the creator. Also, notice this. I'm clearly intellectually honest. For him, he has never made a video
Okay, hold
to
up.
debunk someone
I just
on the
need
left.
to
Does
hear this
that
again.
sound-
That one sentence was...
I first look at the info and the validity thereof on their own merit. Then, if it's relevant, I look at the politics of the creator. Also,
Okay, so what he just said right there, he says, when I make a video, I first look at the arguments, and then, if it matters, I look at the politics. He hasn't looked at any of the arguments yet, he just looked straight at the politics. We're 7 minutes in. He hasn't looked at any of the arguments, he just looked at the claim. And before Fredda substantiated anything, he's already like tearing him down for politics. Like, how did he write this? How did he edit this and not see the obvious contradiction? Are you kidding me?
notice this. I'm clearly intellectually honest. For him, he has never made a video to debunk someone on the left. Does that sound like unbiased academic neutrality to you? Just telling it how it is? Facts over feelings? More like Gulag over Stalin? Make no mistake, Fredda is a propaganda channel.
And you're not... I mean, you're not a propaganda channel to the extent that, like, you know, you're constantly pushing the same thing, but... What am I saying? You're a useful idiot, at best. Because all you're doing is you're normalizing a lot of right-wing positions. You have a lot of right-wing people in your audience, and you're cajoling them constantly with the videos you make, with your rhetoric. Like, this part is like my meme response to you, okay? See?
Us with a perfect Rorschach test to figure out his politics and understanding of history.
Was Nazism left-wing or right-wing? This question is a form of ahistorical syllogism. In my opinion, there are two major problems here. One, they use the American left-right dichotomy, or political spectrum, and they forcefully apply it to historical...
Why this? It's like he can't even let the guy make his own content without, like, writing stuff all over him to try and immediately get his own audience. Like, it's like his audience can't think for themselves, right? It's like, okay, you're watching a video, you're seeing what the argument is, but then your own favorite content creator is telling you right above it that whatever he's about to say is going to be stupid. Therefore, you shouldn't take it seriously. That's what this is.
European political regimes and ideologies. Two, they use 21st century political spectra and juxtapose them over 20th century politics.
The core of his issue in regards to this is a phenomenon called presentism, though he doesn't use that word because it's a word an actual historian would use.
A word an actual historian would use.
Also, can we talk about the fake laughter? Metatron's laughter is so cringe. Like, there is nothing real about that laughter. I wish I could actually hear him, like, crack up at something that is not actually, like, attacking him to see if, like, the laugh sounds different. Because it's gotta. There's no way that laugh is real. But his whole historical syllogism is misapplied. Well, the point is, like, I've just seen it. Like, let's just let it play. But...
Oh my gosh, what a sanctimonious narcissist. Fredda's argument. Metatron doesn't use the word presentism. Real historians use the word presentism. Hence, Metatron is no real historian. Point the finger and mock. Let's take this at face value. Regardless...
Okay, no, you need to understand Fredda in the context that he's actually saying it. The whole point of Fredda's video is to go over Metatron's methodology, or rather the lack thereof, or to explain how it's flawed. Sure, like, that was a little jab, you know, just for fun. Like, okay, he didn't use the word presentism because that's a word actual historians would use. Okay, fine. Like, I know I've heard Metatron before use the word presentism. But what Fredda is pointing to here is the fact that Metatron is using a whole bunch of words, but here's the proper term that would define it all. The fact is that Metatron does a lot of word salads. That's what it is. And that's it. So like Metatron like getting lost on this, like, oh, he said whatever. I can't even do an impression.
Less of my phrasing here. My point is conceptually accurate, even if I don't use the term presentism. But
yes. And that's not something that Fredda suggests, that like you're not correct on this one. He's just saying what you're talking about is presentism. And that's just the proper term. What he's doing there is just showing that like he knows also what he's talking about. He knows how history works. And he's trying to explain how you don't. Or rather, how you don't do real history. Yeah, another funny thing about this is that the left-right dichotomy isn't an American thing. It has its origin in the French Revolution. It does. And the thing about, like, even if you make the point that Metatron has done in that Nazi video, which is that left-right can mean different things based on geography, culture, and time period, it's also true. But you can also point to patterns of left-wing ideologies and right-wing ideologies. When you're on the left, we're talking about flattening the hierarchy. When you're on the right, we're talking about promoting hierarchies. That's like, when you put it that simple, you can look at any ideology in past and present, even before the French Revolution came up with it, and you can see some clear patterns where it's like the people who were more on the left were trying to make things equal, and people who were more on the right were trying to preserve the hierarchies of power. It's not complicated at all. But yeah, the fact that Metatron points it like that shows how little of an understanding he has of that.
you see, that doesn't matter here, because Fredda wants you to believe that if you don't use a particular term, your entire argument is invalid. It's
not that your entire argument is invalid, it's that it just shows that you're not really doing history as well as you could. It just means that, like, you're making some obvious mistakes that an historian would not normally make.
As that sounds, do you see how weak of a line of argumentation this is once you actually look at it? And pardon me if I indulge, but this type of argument is not what a real historian would use. He's not even trying to refute the point. He's trying to establish dominance, and in his mind, intellectual superiority. It's a narcissistic cry, and it's easily identified and refuted. But I don't even need to do this. And, you know why? Here is one of many examples directly from a video posted 1 year ago, titled "Why Did I Do This to Myself?" on minute 441. And he brings forth constantly is that of presentism.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, again, like, how hung up do you get on, like, every single thing? From the perspective of Fredda, that was just like a quick little jab at you. That's it. Look at how far Metatron is going on that single point. He is so desperate to discredit Fredda before he actually says anything, because bear in mind, he hasn't said anything yet. The only point that we've heard so far is, yeah, when Metatron is talking about, like, the, what was the term? Ahistorical syllogism? Well, all he's doing, Fredda is saying, yeah, that's called presentism.
Use the word presentism all the time. It was another lie. I'm getting embarrassed for him.
Instead, he calls it an ahistorical syllogism. Presentism is a complicated subject, and there's varying definitions and ways to use the term. But one use of the term is to describe the way in which the present exerts pressure on the historian's construction of the past.
Anyways, let's go into the ahistorical syllogism, because in fact, it was a very apt descriptor. While it is correct that the word presentism would have also been appropriate in this case, they are not the same. I chose this word specifically in my script because I thought it fit better with the point I was trying to make, and it was useful when conducting an analysis.
Okay, just move on, dude. Like, okay, you want to be, like, super pedantic about this? This is your response. You're 10 minutes in, there's 40 minutes left, and you're still hung up on just the use of ahistorical syllogism against presentism. Fredda was about to go into a whole thing. I don't remember it exactly, but he was about to go into a whole thing of what presentism actually entails in the context of historiography. He was about to go over all of that, and you just cut him off to say, like, well, actually, I looked at a dictionary, and I thought that was the term I used was better. Okay, and can we get to the point, please? Because Fredda's already moved on. Can you please move on too? Like, even if you said, like, oh, I used the word, like, even if we concede the point, okay, it's conceded, fine. It means nothing. Just move on.
Syllogism is a type of logical argument that uses deductive reasoning to arrive at a conclusion based on two premises. It's a foundational concept in classic logics, especially in Aristotelian logic.
Who
Syllogisms
cares?
are at the heart of deductive reasoning. If the form is valid and the premises are true, then the
This is why I said in my conversation in Trouble, like, and I actually, like, I never used Twitter, but when that video came out, after the first 3 minutes, I decided, like, that's it, that's enough, and I actually went on Twitter, and I wrote quickly to Metatron. I should check later if he responded, but I asked him, like, how open are you to the idea of actually, like, talking directly to your critics? Because if he had been talking to Fredda, like, this whole part here would not even exist. Because all they would do is like, okay, whatever, like, this is what we're talking about, blah, 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 okay, let's move on. But because Metatron has control over what he decides to talk about, he can just get into these endless word salads, these endless pedantic spiels of just not doing anything. I don't care, Metatron. Nobody cares. Okay, maybe you can maybe the way you used it is okay, as opposed to how Fredda is talking about it. But when we're talking about, like, within the context of history and how it applies to history, Fredda is going to be talking about presentism. You can't be making the same arguments that Fredda is making if he was using a historical syllogism. So that's the only reason he's going into that context. You don't need to do that. Just move on. I think I'm going to end up having to skip.
conclusion must also be true. However, we need to be careful because a syllogism can be logically valid but factually wrong if the premises are false. An example would be, all fish can fly, a salmon is a fish, therefore a salmon can fly. The logical form is intact, but the major premise is false.
Oh my God.
So, in this context, a ahistorical syllogism would imply a syllogistic argument or line of reasoning that fails to consider or is indifferent to the historical context of the ideas and events being discussed. In essence, what I was suggesting here is that we have to be careful when using a form of reasoning, even if it draws from a logically valid premise, because it could potentially.
It's very simple. Like, if you really want to get to the crux of the issue, what he was talking about in his video when he says, like, okay, this is ahistorical syllogism because people who ask whether the Nazis are left or right are asking it in the modern sense of left-right American politics, even though it's the 1940s Germany. Presentism works perfectly to describe that as well. Like, it's not even a question of whether or not, you're using the right word or the wrong term. Maybe you can work your way into this logic where you're like, oh, well, I think I used it properly. Okay, whatever. It's still not the right term. When you're talking about, like, historiography, the term that's going to be used to describe what you're talking about is going to be presentism. Even if you think you used it properly. Like, and even if I decide to, like, concede it, okay? Like, let's say we just conceded. Okay, like, you were perfectly correct in using the term ahistorical syllogism. I'm having a hard time saying that. Again, who the hell cares? It's so insignificant in the broader point that is being made. Can we just move on, please? I just checked the video where he supposedly used presentism. He uses it in a different context and defines it as modern-day people feeling superior to people of the past. It could be, even in that context, like, I want to be, like, super generous here. I would say maybe he's talking about, like, moral presentism. That's not the same as presentism as used in history. It's just saying, well, back in the day, women didn't have any rights and now we have rights, therefore we're better. If that's how he uses the term presentism, it's stupid. That's not what it means. But if you were to say, like, okay, well, it's moral, philosophical presentism, talking about how the values of today are better than the values of the past, okay, but you're right. Like, the context in which he uses it would still not be the standard definition of presentism as it's used in historiography.
Lead to inaccurate or irrelevant conclusions. So I was saying be careful to use only reason and logics when discussing the past. Do you remember when he actually accused me of only using reason and logics to discuss the past? I would call this a lie too, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think this one is a lie. I just think he didn't understand. Coming from the guy who explains every word like his audience are idiots. Case in point.
presents every word like his audience are idiots. What do you do? What is all the pedantic stuff? If not like trying to swarm your audience with word salads constantly. If that's the best he could cite of him using the word of God for a gotcha, it's a low bar. Yeah.
Truth. By ideal, I mean that it's the goal, but in practice, it's one we'll never quite fully reach.
See what I did there? I made a
Wait a minute.
statement. Case in point.
Truth. By ideal, I mean that
See what I did there? I made a statement about something that he does, and then I found a clip to prove that that is indeed what he does, and my words were not hyperbole.
Wait, you're talking about like how you just accused him of talking to his audience like they're children, when the name of the video is History is Interpretation, Objectivity, quote-unquote, in history. Without looking at the video, I feel pretty confident that this is about the concept of historical revisionism, which I've also made a video on, historical revisionism. What he's talking about here is just the idea that like nothing is fixed in history. There's always more evidence to find, there's always more evidence missing, and the point is that you can't really be objective in history. You can only have a vague idea of what happened, and that idea can be pretty clear, but it's never fixed. There's always the possibility of new evidence coming to you eventually, because as one of the articles I reacted to like a year or two ago said, realistically, you cannot record all of history in its entirety. You can't have every single point of view. You can't have a completely neutral recording of the historical event, depending on like who says it or the quality of the evidence that you find, if it's been degraded or something. That's the whole point. So if you're accusing him here of explaining stuff to his audience like they're children, when the whole point of the video is to introduce people to the simple concept that history cannot be objective. And on top of that, like, he just grabbed this video out of context, like doing... My God. Oh my God. It is a complete meltdown. I don't understand like how he can be so eager to hammer on when there's no nails to hit.
He explained the meaning of the word ideal like his audience is a bunch of imbeciles. I'd like to...
Oh, that's what it is. That's what it is. He's talking about ideal. Okay. He's talking to his audience like children. Meanwhile, you're like, well, here's the difference between presentism and ahistorical syllogism. I'm using more fancy words, therefore I'm talking to grown-ups. Like, seriously? Okay.
Stress that. Not the meaning of quantum entanglement. Ideal. That's how you make a statement about someone else. Now, differently from him, I couldn't put a sponsor on this video because of the controversial nature of this engagement, even though I'm just defending myself while he lied about me and was financially rewarded for it. But there is one thing I can do, and that is sponsoring myself. As you know, we have created a Metatron.
Okay, so what do you mean you can't get a sponsor because of the controversial nature of this video? Like, do you mean that your usual sponsors won't actually touch this one? Okay. So? You're still trying to make money out of it. That's the reason you made this video. Why are you, like, throwing shade at Fredda for doing the same? It's really stupid.
Metatron plushie for all of our fans and supporters, and we are really trying to hit 200 sales. We are kind of far from it. We still need about 90 sales to be placed, and we only have a few days. If you do like my videos, please consider getting one plushie now. Thank you so much.
The issue about this complaint about history that wants to put the historian outside of the historian's context is that it essentially wishes for a history without the historian.
What does this have to do with me?
You're asking for an analysis of history that stands apart not just from the historian, but also from the time in which the analysis is being conducted.
I what?
A history that exists as an objective and true story to be simply uncovered, untainted by interpretation.
For crying out loud, have the decency to use an argument that I actually make.
He's about to, idiot! I'm sorry, that's an ad hom. He is making the point, and then you will substantiate it with a video. Why are you so eager to just attack him before he has a chance to do so? If you genuinely come at this in good faith, you don't do stuff like that. You just look at the video, you look at it point for point, and then you actually address the points. What he's talking about here is what he was saying early on, and he's working his way up to that, and it's the rationalization of history as Metatron does it. It's the idea that, you know, because he's talking about presentism, right? The idea is that if you're trying to understand the history as it happened, and you're doing presentism, that means you are injecting your own moral and modern sense of how history works onto people in the past that that would not necessarily think that way because they're from a different time period. But what he's saying is that what Metatron does is that, in spite of talking about like ahistorical syllogism, he ends up doing the exact same thing. And I know for a fact that that Fredda is going to show it in the video. So Metatron just bashing in at every syllable at this point to just throw in his own quick jab that is completely meaningless. Like, there's a real term for this if we want to get like super technical. This is gish galloping. Is that the term, actually? Gish galloping. Like, he's just like throwing in fast jabs, all of them more meaningless than the next, but he's swarming the video with so much nonsense that means nothing that by the point Fredda actually makes his full argument, he would have been interrupted so many times, he would have been utterly discredited, the well would have been poisoned with radioactive waste. And so he's just going to throw these little jabs at the arguments when they arrive and then pretend like he destroyed Fredda. Like, Jesus.
How about that?
This is impossible to accomplish. History has to fit into modern understandings of the world, and this, alongside many other things, of course, might be a point where me and Metatron fundamentally disagree.
Yep, and had you been civil, dropped the I am better than thou attitude and the character assassination attempts, we could have actually engaged in this disagreement about fundamental truth in a way.
Okay, can we actually talk? Because this is something that Metatron does all the time, right? Like, oh, you know, you've been rude to me. If you weren't rude to me, we could have had a conversation. This is something I think Ben Benada said when he did his own double response to Metatron. He said, the problem with Metatron is that he feels entitled to be treated with respect in spite of his videos being very shallow. Like, when people like criticize the content and they're being harsh, that's the argument. If your argument is then that, well, you were mean to me, so now I'm mean to you, you're just a child. You want to talk about like how they were rude to you, that's fine. But if you want to claim the moral high ground, you need to be above it. And that's up to you to do that. You know, it's not their fault that you choose to act this childishly. It's your video. You're the one writing it. You're the one acting like this. And the second thing is, I don't actually remember like what Fredda, like, to the extent to how like he mischaracterizes, or well, not mischaracterizes, but, you know, attacks Metatron directly. The one thing he said in the intro is he made an allusion to you know, medievalists content slowly turning into just hating women in video games. That was a broad statement, not necessarily aimed at Metatron. It could have been aimed at Shad or another one of these YouTubers from that community, if any more of them turn to the right. And then he just threw a small jab at Metatron for not using the word presentism. So far, that's all Fredda did. You know, he didn't actually accuse Metatron of being a liar. He didn't accuse him of being a grifter. He didn't say he was stupid. He just did those two things. What has Metatron done in the past 14 minutes? He called, he made allusions to his politics. Like, he went as far as to go into like this crappy, tanky wikia, because they happen to have an article on Fredda that he has no control over. He makes fun of his cover photo without actually trying to understand what the joke that Fredda was doing was. And then he's like, well, he's a tanky, he's a Marxist, and he wants to give the bullet to everybody. He's a liar. So much garbage in 14 minutes. And then you turn around and you're like, well, if you were nice to me, none of this would happen. This video feels like, I've heard this expression before, like, what it feels like, this video feels like Metatron just quickly citing all of the stuff he was thinking about in the shower after watching Fredda's video for the first time. Like, he's just thinking of all these arguments in his head, and he's like, oh, that's what I should say, you know, like, that's what I should do. And then he just blurts them all out with no regard to the actual content of the conversation or the arguments. and he thinks he's, got it all figured out. Anyway, okay, so I really don't care personally for like this whole like moral thing, but for a fact that if he actually did decide to respond to me, that's exactly the same thing you would do too. It would be like, oh, okay, well, someone called him comrade under one of his videos, so he's a Marxist-Leninist, he's a tanky too. Oh, he talked with Trill Black, then he's definitely an Afrocentrist and agrees with everything they do. Oh, he's a leftist, that means he's an authoritarian, and to an extent a Nazi, because a Nazi are neither left nor right, but authoritarian, and if Terry is authoritarian, then technically he's a Nazi. Like, he would do all of this garbage and never actually come to terms with the fact that he's just full of shit. Because all of his videos are just ridiculously wrong. This is why at this point I'm like, I would not really judge Metatron for wanting to do a response essay on me, because I've done them. But I've also publicly said to him, okay, we could debate or we could talk. At this point, that's what Metatron needs to do. The entire reason he's got this entire poor framing for the past 14 minutes that he's doing all of that is because there's no one there to interrupt him when he's doing it. He can write his entire video like this, he can record it, he can edit it, and as the video plays, other than people like me who pause it and then give their response, he is in complete control of the narrative, of the rhetoric, of how things are said. The reality is that if he really, really wants to put his beliefs, his facts into practice, he needs to be on even ground, on a conversation with somebody who's actually going to hold him to his points and show him to his face what his contradictions are, what the poor research is, and then Metatron would have, without a script, without hiding behind his camera and pre-editing his videos, he would have to just say on the spot why he's still correct. And I don't think at this point that he ever will, but I could be wrong.
That would foster academic discourse. But you chose the let's make a slander hit piece video instead.
But I don't actually think so, and I'll explain why later on. To close off this point about history being a conduit between the past and the present, let me quote American historian Hasok Chan.
Yeah, let's not, considering the fact that he's gonna use now a very long and boring quotation to try and refute an argument that isn't mine, therefore wasting my and your time.
I think, Metatron, if you're going to do something like that, at least you can do is invite people to watch the video that you're talking about, so as to not, this is something that another essayist I used to do, Sean. Whenever he did a response video, he would say, I encourage all of you to go watch the video I'm responding to make sure I don't misrepresent them. Right now, he's just completely skipping over an entire part of what Fredda is saying, while also arguing that the argument is not one that Fredda was making. I'm sorry, that the argument that Fredda was making is not one that Metatron was making. That he's accusing Metatron of, saying something he never said. So therefore he's going to skip through the entire thing. But again, if you want to actually engage with the argument that Fredda is making, then actually take the time to, properly address it. Right? Come on.
Let's skip ahead. Hey, Fredda, what's going on here? That's not what my video looked like. Even his video editing software is trying to twist my points to an unrecognizable state.
You want to talk about, okay, we're at the 1414. Let's talk about, the first video, Metatron. You got a horizontal effect on your video, man. What are you doing? Don't you know that you can reverse this comfortably? We can see that the text is not in the right sequential order. What happened to your editing? What likely just happened with Fredda's video, and I can say this from experience because I had the same problem in one of my last videos on this channel when I was trying to capture Jubilee videos, is that sometimes it just glitches like hell in front of you, and you don't really know what to do. And it's probably just like a frame, and he moves on. Actually, it is probably just a frame, and Metatron is just isolating it. How long is this clip that's in the wrong sense? I'm just saying, dude. Where were we? There you go. I think that's it. Yeah.
You looked like even his video editing software is trying to twist my points to an unrecognizable state.
Again, Metatron, I am positive, doesn't laugh like this.
to overlap neatly and perfectly with 20th century European political factions in order to come out with an answer is a flawed analytical method.
Yes, trying to figure out if Hitler was a, quote, I'm with her guy or a member of the Republican Party in 2016 is silly. But luckily, that is not what historians and others are actually doing when they approach this topic.
Two problems here. First, I wasn't complaining about historians. I was talking about people who deal with these topics, mostly YouTubers, so already it's a strawman. However, there are some academics that do nonsense like this, so I'm actually gonna do that now, because you're wrong, regardless. Even though it wasn't my original point, I'll agree with this fictitious version of...
So you want to talk about like utterly lazy editing? One thing that I've been watching at this entire time that really bothers me is the fact that Metatron's logo is not a square. Like, there is no reason for it to be this wide. It's this wide because this is the logo that he likes to use at the end of his videos, you know, like it cuts to this, and then it ends, you know? But that just means that he grabbed a quick screenshot of that one image, and then he put it on, but then it's like you've got like this overly large rectangle that's really getting to me right now. And that's what I would call, personally, extremely lazy editing. I get that because you're making a scripted video, you don't necessarily want to show your face because maybe you're doing this over multiple days or whatever. But you can be better than that with your avatar. I'm just saying.
myself that you created. Good historians don't do that, so we can agree.
This is what I mean. Like, he's grabbing this whole thing, and it's in 16:9, and then when he cuts it, he doesn't bother, like, trimming out the sides to make it more pretty, like a square.
Agree with that, but activists who use their degrees to push their agenda, oh, they will. Not that I need to. Anyone watching this knows this already, but I'm happy to prove this with empirical data anytime. What do we do now? Well, to answer this correctly, first, we need to ensure objectivity to our analysis.
These guys very often present themselves as, quote, rational skeptics who are just presenting the objective facts.
This is not how you make a response video, Fredda. You don't just say how other people present themselves, you prove it.
Yes, and he's about to prove it, like, right there. By going over your video. Can you just shut up and let him talk? His point here doesn't matter because Fredda's argument is about the left-right dichotomy which precedes modern American politics. Yeah, it is. And he's just getting hung up on the fact that, like, it's still the presentism stuff. He's still hung up on that.
With clips. I swear, this thing you do when you put words into people's mouths they have never said and then try to ridicule and attack them for those words you fabricated, you do it so much that it has just become second nature to you. It's muscle memory at this point with this guy.
I'm sure you didn't notice the Maoist standard. Yeah, Maoist standard English translation. Rational SS skeptics. It is pretty funny.
About this method in my previous video, whereby it was used by a literal out-and-about Nazi.
And here it is. I was actually surprised it still hadn't come to that. Here is the mental manipulation. Let's look at this closely. I talk about objective reality and facts. Then he says that so do the actual Nazi. What is the conclusion he wants you to...
Well, you're just doing what you're accusing him of doing, which is that you're saying, like, okay, you know, he's paraphrasing me, he's misquoting me, and now you're misquoting him. The part he's talking about isn't so much that, like, the Nazis, you know, like, presented themselves as rational skeptics. He's saying that when you present yourself as a rational skeptic, you are doing a disservice to history, and you are, in fact... hold up, guys. Okay. Surprise live stream? Yes, shortcut. Hi, welcome. Leftist Metatron, actually the translation is wrong. In ancient Maoist standard Latin, that would be skeptics. Oh, with the KKK. Okay, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, he's just like, okay, let's just
Draw
go.
then. Metatron says X, Nazis say X, Metatron is a Nazi. You see, in this segment, Fredda used two logical fallacies at once, and it's been extremely disingenuous and dishonest. First of all, framing language. He's using emotionally loaded terms, aka Nazis. Also, he's using the so-called
Yeah, Nazi is just such a loaded term. You know what I mean? It's like if the Nazis say something and you call him a Nazi, it's loaded. What he needs to, what Fredda is trying to talk about, as I understand it, he's like drawing the parallel and talking about how Metatron's, the way he approaches history, is actually leaning into that. That doesn't necessarily mean he's a Nazi himself. It just means that he's basically, the way he approaches it is doing a disservice. That's what it's leading to.
Association fallacy.
And you can call that an association fallacy all you want, but the problem is he makes the association later. And that's what you need to actually address if you want to call it an association fallacy. But you're not talking about it because you're getting there before Fredda does.
Sometimes referred to as guilt by association, which is a type of logical fallacy in which someone argues that a claim is true or false based on the character, group, or belief of the person making it, rather than on the merits of the argument itself. In other words, he's attempting to discredit someone's argument by associating them with an unpopular, disreputable, or extreme person or group, even if the connection is weak or non-existent, the latter being the case here. The reason why this is a fallacy...
Yeah, it's wrong. Okay, well, he's about to say like this is wrong, but I was like, I just like how he didn't immediately explain it. That's what he should do. Not necessarily that it's right-leaning, but it's used as a shield by people like Zoomer Historian, who could also be on the left as Stalinist. Yeah, well, that's the point. It's that, like, it's the way you rationalize it in a way to launder the arguments that you would otherwise have if you were a little more honest about it. The problem with Metatron's video on the Nazis, ultimately, is that he thinks the Nazis are left-wing. And he could be coming at me right now and be like, well, hold on. I said they were neither left nor right. But that just means you say they're left-wing, honestly. Because you know who believes that the Nazis are on the far right? Nazis. Unite the Right? Unite the Right rally? Full of Nazis. Which mod is that? Not a good one, I'll tell you. Metatron, he's using that logic, like this is the argument that I would approach if I was doing a response to his Nazi video. It's the fact that Metatron is starting from the moderate position, and because he wants to be a moderate, he doesn't want to take a strong, firm stance on the Nazis being either far right or far left. So what does he do throughout the video? He just rationalizes all of what the Nazis do by first passing it through a moral compass that he establishes with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was far left, extreme far left ideology. These are words he uses in his video. And look at how similar the Nazis were. Now, I'm not going to say the Nazis were left, but they were too close to the far left to be considered far right, right? So that means they're just authoritarian. This rationalization is a disservice, and it shows that actually you're probably more on the right than you say you are, but you just don't like that the Nazis are on your side. You don't like that if people just take the beliefs you already have and they just take them further into their extreme, then they're Nazis. That's it. That's all it is. But because Metatron presents himself as a historian, or rather like someone who does like history on his channel, whatever, and he's all about the facts, and he does all this objectivity, presents everything he says as objective, even though his story itself cannot be as subjective as he claims it is, then he can say, well, you know, it's not my biases, it's just the facts. It's just the facts. And if we look at the facts this way, well, you can't really deny what I'm saying. You can't say it's wrong. But then when people like Fredda try to explain like the logic behind how Metatron is doing his video, well, now it's association fallacy, it's ad hominem, it's all that other stuff, and therefore it cannot be taken seriously ever, and there is no retrospection to be done here whatsoever. That's really just it.
Is because truth is not determined by who holds a belief, but by the empirical evidence behind it.
This is what I mean. This is literally what I just mean. He says, like, the truth isn't what you believe, it's the empirical evidence. But the empirical evidence, as Metatron shows it, doesn't work, because some of the evidence he presents is not objective, because history itself cannot always be objective. There's a process that goes behind all of it, and what Fredda calls rationalization is muddying the waters through that entire process to simply like say, look, it's not complicated. The facts are the facts, don't question it. That's just what it is. And because I'm citing the facts, then I'm the one siding with the truth.
easily proven by the obvious fact that even morally corrupt individuals can be correct about some things. Hence, even if we were in the presence of a real tether between whatever kind of logical or methodological framing I was using with the Nazis, once again, an association that isn't true, but even if it were, associating a claim with a disliked source doesn't automatically invalidate the claim. To think critically, we must slow down and disconnect ideas from identities and evaluate claims on their own merits, not any given association.
But what Fredda is implying here is that when it comes to historical facts, you can't dissociate them from how they were recorded or from how you today would personally interpret it. You can't strip the historical fact from the biases that surround it, because otherwise you don't have history. Actually, I'm pretty sure that the part that Metatron decided to skip is exactly that point, if I'm not mistaken.
Or imaginary. Problem is that his intent here is trying to build a questionable historical parallel, exploiting his audience's emotional biases, tribalism, and moral disgust, rather than encouraging rational evaluation of any given data. Another piece of evidence that demonstrates the political propagandistic nature of this channel.
The general gist of it is to depoliticize history as a science, and to portray it as a series of crystallized, unchanging facts, which just so happen to correspond to the person's worldview. You assert things as, quote, just the facts, and reason your way towards why these so-called facts you're presenting are true, without relying on much evidence produced by trained historians.
I have a team behind my production.
Oh my god. I was just there actually listening, and finally, like, Fredda is getting to the point that he was actually making. And I can't believe that this is the first thing Metatron says. Hold on. I need to listen to this again.
The general gist of it is to depoliticize history as a science, and to portray it as a series of crystallized, unchanging facts, which just so happen to correspond to the person's worldview.
This is what I was, like, this is what I was trying to say. Okay, like, I don't know that I said it properly, but that's literally it. It's that by stripping all the context away from the history, you are now presenting it as this purely factual, purely stoic historical fact, but also it just happens to coincide that with everything that you stand for, with everything that you agree with, in spite of, like, history not working that way. But how Metatron responds, I can't believe he actually said that.
Things as,
and I should know better, because it's not actually that surprising. It's just still surprising.
quote, just the facts, and reason your way towards why these so-called facts you're presenting are true, without relying on much evidence produced by trained historians.
I have a team behind my production. One is a trained historian, former archaeologist.
What's his name? Can you name him? Can you cite him in your video description? This is something, actually, I've had a conversation, like, I might have, he might be here, I don't know. But there's been this massive Metatron hater who's been emailing me for a while about some of the videos and some of his thoughts, and one of the main thing that one of his main points of criticism that he comes from with Metatron is how he never cites his team. He said at one point, I think, that, like, he pays each member of his team like $500 per peer review, but that doesn't mean anything. You say that's who they are, but we never actually see them. You make these videos, but you never actually cite anything. There's never any sources for us to look at under your video description. I'm not saying that those people don't necessarily exist, but I would argue that whatever process you guys have that you are using is incorrect. The first problem, and I'm not just going to say this, because, like, he's always talking about, like, peer review, right? Peer review is the process through which, like, you did some research. Yeah, the team, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Grok, that actually, I would not be surprised. I'm joking, I don't know. But the process of peer review is you wrote something, you did a research, and you made your arguments, and you present it. And then you give it to someone who is an equal in your field, or perhaps, like, even higher, or whatever. And there's someone who is also an expert, and this person's job is to scrutinize your entire paper and point out, okay, this is fallacy. This here you make a claim here, but you never really explain it. This is demonstrably false. Here's why. And then they just go through the entire paper, and then, provided there's no ego and you're really trying to come out with your paper, like, you will make revisions, and then you will peer review again. Perhaps this time you'll even include someone else who is completely fresh, so that it's, not as biased, I guess. But that's the process. Now, what happens if the person that is doing the peer review is paid? Is actually paid by you to peer review their work? I'm just going to say, there's a lot of scientists out there that have argued that climate change is not real, and they were paid by oil companies. So what happens when you have a YouTuber with a clear right-leaning bias, as much as he would want to distance himself from that claim? What happens when you are telling people who you never cite, who you never show up in your video, listen, you will not have to appear, I will not give your name, but off camera, when no one is watching, I'm going to ask you to peer review my work, and I'm going to pay you for it. What happens in that context if the guy who does the peer review has an incentive, for instance, to not go too harsh on your documents, because otherwise they might be out of a job if it just so happens that behind the scenes you have a massive ego? This is pure speculation on my part. I have no idea what's going on, but the fact that we don't know who they are, that you don't actually cite them ever, that you don't give their names, that you don't show any kind of behind the scenes into the process that you use, to me that tells me that how much you're saying here really doesn't matter. And hold up, guys.
Just 2 years of experience digging in Syria. One is a published author. One is an anthropologist with a
Okay, sorry. I didn't realize I unmuted my mic. Wanting to keep it secret is fine, but if you do that, you shouldn't also be using them to defend your points. Exactly. If you don't want to show them, don't use them to defend yourself, because you're not using them. If you don't show them, don't bring it up. Also, you say one of them is a published author. Okay, who is he? Clearly he doesn't mind, giving his name. You should believe that the team's presence has improved the quality of your work and that you don't need to hide behind the facts. Exactly. But this is what I mean. He keeps talking about how he has a team. I don't know if Fredda has a team, but Fredda has said that he is a historian, and he points it out multiple times. This is what he does. He's not hiding behind anyone else. If you want to question Fredda's hair. What? I'll let you know, guys, if the connection is bad, because I saw for a moment there I seem to have lost it. Might have been just for a fraction of a second, I don't know. But anyway, let's go for it.
Doctoral degree. One is an Egyptologist PhD. I can continue. Also considering that I've...
So why not continue? Why not name them? Why not say who you work with? Why not show some of the process that you actually go through? I'll say this for myself. I've said it multiple times, I'm not educated. I'm not a historian. I certainly have no experience in sociology. I have no academic background in any of that stuff. But if I can look at your videos and see just how obviously wrong you are on something, then I don't really care about your team, but it would still be nice to see the process that went behind it, so at least we can see what's wrong.
shown their names, qualifications and faces on screen multiple times, but it doesn't matter because he doesn't care about the truth, nor does he care about evidence. He's gonna say they don't exist. Another lie.
You sidestep the actual debates and uncertainties of history in order to simplify the larger picture. The point is to cleverly avoid actually engaging with history and instead relying on debate and argumentation.
Once again, Strawman number... You know what? I actually lost count. What is it by now? 15? Not my statement. I never said this. Why is this video about me if you're not gonna use a single thing I said? You could have put Kermit the Frog at this point on the thumbnail and graphics and it would have made zero difference.
I've talked about so-called objective history in past videos. I'll summarize by saying history is aspirationally objective, but practically cannot be objective because the fundamental nature of the field necessitates all sorts of selection and interpretation that cannot be fully divorced from subjectivity.
The biggest problem Metatron is having right now is he doesn't understand that Fredda is making a broader point about how history YouTube doesn't always do things very well, and he's using Metatron as an example when it's convenient, when it's expedient, rather. So Metatron is like, oh, you're not, like, you know, saying anything about me, and it's like, well, he is, but first he has to explain the methodology. And by explaining the methodology, then he can go over your content and he can show how you are, in fact, doing what he says you're doing. That's really all it is. But again, like, Metatron just keeps interrupting and keeps trying fallacy and ad homs and whatever, like, so nothing is getting actually achieved. I just like the idea that, like, he says, like, you know, like, they are not doing history right, and Metatron's only defense to that is to list his team's academic achievements. Looks like Fredda is making a live response too. I hope he is. If he does, I'll definitely go watch it, but I would appreciate anyone who sticks around here instead, please. Actually, we got like a good average of like 15 people in the chat for like the past 30 minutes or so. It's actually a pretty high performance live stream considering like the timing in which I decided to do it. And I mean, Metatron's video just came out, so of course a bunch of people are going to do that, but like my algorithm timing is getting pretty good. Yeah, 15 for someone on your channel is pretty good. It is.
Now, to try and strengthen this absurdity that he has just mentioned, he's gonna read a quote to, as always, pretend to be smarter than you, as he does. But before we get to that, let me say this.
So reading quotes that make your arguments is just pretending to be smarter. Is that the level that we're working with? Like, how desperate is this? How childish is this? It's like Metatron is clinging on to anything to try and make his argument. Are you kidding me? Oh, you know, you're just citing people to feel smarter about yourself. Are you serious? Oh, you try and explain the basic concept to your audience? Well, it means like you're talking to children. You're talking to people like you're talking to children. Oh man, it's ridiculous.
Alright, so now he's attacking the concept of objective truth in relation to history.
Yes, please, let's get to that. We're 20 minutes in, for God's sake.
If at any point you had any doubt that this was anything but a propaganda channel, welcome to Reality Check.
Here's a quote by E.H. Carr from his book What is History? Quote,
Hold it there, Professor. Rather than listening to the quote, boring you to death, let's analyze his utilization of it. Upon closer inspection, another interesting element to this becomes clear. A lot of Fredda's videos are quotation after quotation by volume. Given, using the occasional quotation to strengthen a position is fine, but his videos are literally him reading what someone else said at you for money.
Thank you, sir.
Oh my god. I think right now he's trying to make a point. I think he's trying to draw a line between what Fredda is doing and like plagiarism. He's saying that because he quotes a lot of people and then makes money off of his videos, then what? Because it's on his own words, he's doing plagiarism or something? You can't quote people. And the fact that like this part is especially telling. Yeah, what is this? He has clearly never read a single history book. I mean, I guess we'll see. But the point is, yeah, if you're making a video about history and you quote historians, that kind of comes with the territory. I can't believe that Metatron of all people would look at this and be like, well, clearly he's just doing it for his Surfshark sponsorship, whatever that is. Change promo code Fredda for promo liar. Are you kidding me? They have hundreds upon hundreds of citations. You'd be hard-pressed to find pages without them. It's all quoting others. It is. Like, I have a book right here. Oh, let's actually, like, talk about how that works, okay? Hold on. Meet the massive brick. This is my biography on Napoleon by Andrew Roberts. And what you're saying, May, is exactly this. Like, okay, we're at page... Not even. I don't know why I said that. Okay. Okay, I'm at page 811. this much. This is the entire end of the book that is just citations for this book. Like, people think this is really long and they don't realize that like you'll be ending this book much quicker than you think, because the rest, all citations. It's just a long, non-ending list of citations. When you do history, that's how it works. That's how it works. That's you cite the people that you're talking about. You cite the people you are referencing and you quote them. This idea that it would just be like, oh, you know, he's like, if you go on this channel, he actually cites a lot of people and then he makes money. Really? Really? It's kind of telling also what you say, because like he says, like, okay, like there's nothing wrong with citing people, but he's citing people too much. Okay, but Metatron, if you're going to make a history video, you're going to have to cite a bunch of other people if you're trying to reference other things. You'll have to do the same thing. If you don't, that means none of your work has citations to it. It just means you're just making stuff up and you don't have any sources. You know, and if and the real plagiarism here would be to pass historians' quotes as your own, actually. That could be the real problem. If a lot of the stuff you're saying is just paraphrasing what other historians said and then passing it off as your own, to me that would be plagiarism. But this is horrible. Like, talk about, like, I don't understand how this one guy can say, like, oh, you know, like, they attacked me and that was rude, and then say stuff like this. Like, automatically. I wonder how much, like, I don't want to presume too much, but I am wondering, genuinely, if, like, some of the things I say in my videos, because I know Metatron watched my videos, I wonder if some of it doesn't, like, stick. Because one of the things that I said that he really doesn't like is that he's a grifter, and I feel like he's trying to put that onto someone else right now. Where he's like, you know, like, people call me a grifter. I need to call someone else a grifter. You know? Armchair psychology, obviously, but, like, my god. This is
Shark for
embarrassing.
Reading what someone else said at you for money.
Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring.
Fredda is not used to use the sources to make his own contributions to the historical field as any advanced academic does. He's used to repeat what someone else says as under...
Okay, so that's what this is about, really? So, this is kind of what I was just talking about, isn't it? Like, okay, your argument is that the reason he's citing a lot of people is because he's not coming up with interesting ways of saying it in his own words himself. That's just a personal choice, isn't it? Like, if you decide to cite people to make your point, at most it's a creative decision. It just means that, like, okay, you feel like this person said it well, so I'm just going to quote them. And let people know that, like, this is the source and this is where they can go for more information. I don't see the problem here. But this idea is like, you know, like, oh, I'm an advanced historian. Therefore, I don't cite people. I just look for the source and then paraphrase it. This is ridiculous. I would say that by not paraphrasing it and actually citing the historian, you are showing more integrity. You are giving credit where credit is due. That's how I see it.
As any advanced academic does. He's used to...
And yeah, he is labeling himself as an advanced academic in there. And then when Fredda actually did attack, like, his historical analysis, the first thing Metatron did is say, well, actually, I got a team. Huh? What you gonna do about that?
Repeat what someone else says, as undergraduates do. Moreover, this is the best example of Dunning-Kruger effect. He knows a little, overestimates his knowledge and competence, but that's enough
Massive projection.
for him to think he's better than anyone else. I mean, look at this.
What does he even mean by this?
Where is the creativity? Where are the contributions? Where is academia? What makes your channel worth watching, Fredda, if all you do is read someone else's words? And mind you, historians can be wrong.
So he has a joke, because when you talk about how, you know, you're going to analyze the Nazis' political spectrum, you might have to do a mathematical equation. And that made him laugh, because he's like, what does that even mean? And for you, you're like, see how desperate you are for a gotcha? I'm gonna one-up you, man. He's 21 minutes in. How many times has Metatron himself done this? I really hope so. Like, this is something that someone else said in the Discord. I desperately hope. You know, because, like I said at the beginning of the video, like, Fredda's video on Metatron hit it pretty big, and he himself is a somewhat pretty big YouTuber, at least compared to the other people Metatron has responded to, and the video is massive. It's got over 300,000 views right now, and it's reaching a lot of people who had tuned out of watching Metatron before he even started making videos like the Nazi one. I really hope that out of this response, there's a sort of breaking point here where, like, people actually gang up on Metatron. I mean, Fredda's audience, other people who have been disillusioned, who just, like, are a loud enough majority that Metatron has no choice but to look at this video and actually see the comments that are telling him, like, listen, this is embarrassing. You are a shell of your former self when you say stuff like this. Anyway. We've been at this for like an hour and a half, and we're barely even halfway to the video. I guess I have a lot of very transformative commentary.
So then, you're not even educating. His video productions are just reading quotes from someone else, and all he adds are either full-on lies or ideological.
Also, where's the clip? You accused him of saying stuff without showing clips. Where's the clip? I hope it's coming next.
Driven, twisted facts that clearly clash with.
Because all I got right now is B-roll footage from your stock website, whatever you use.
Documented evidence upon close inspection. Moreover, the real reason why he quotes so much in his videos is not to educate. He's deploying another logical fallacy.
What is this stock footage though? You're talking about like fallacies and everything. You've got like this horror background. What? Are you okay? Why am I looking at bloody handprints in a Victorian era house that's been desaturated with old dirty film effect? What are you talking about? You're talking about a fallacy here. What is this image? What is going on in Metatron's head? What creative decision is leading someone to use this? My God.
Much in his videos is not to educate. He's deploying another logical fallacy called argument from authority. An argument from authority.
And he's the one talking about like, oh, you know, like he is, you know, quoting a lot of people, and I'm the advanced historian that doesn't quote people. So really what he's saying is, you know, like he's appealing to authority, and Metatron is appealing to his authority and that of his team. There's no self-awareness here. Like, this is incredibly stupid.
Is a type of reasoning in which a claim is deemed true or more likely to be true because it is made by someone who is presented as an authority. These kind of arguments can be persuasive, but it's not a proof. Authorities can be mistaken, biased, or misquoted. In critical thinking and debate, the strength of an argument should ultimately rest on evidence and reasoning, not just on who said it. Anyways, now we get to the good stuff. Check this out. Focus on attitudes towards private property, individual freedom, and...
Okay, like, I've seen the video enough because at some point I was working a script on it before I decided to ditch the project. The audacity to say argument from authority after improperly citing an anarcho-capitalist website for his Hitler video. Yeah, talk about audacity. No, there is no self-awareness here. He's just, this is what I mean, this is gish galloping, where he's just throwing all these points that only marginally look like they make sense, and then you think about it for 2 seconds and it doesn't. But he's throwing out so many of them that there's no way to, like, respond to every single thing unless you're pausing like I do, and we'll be here for a couple more hours. But... how... Yeah, I'm starting to lose my energy, and my vocal folds are starting to give up.
Wealth redistribution patterns.
But yeah, what I was gonna say here is, yeah, Metatron is just cutting into his own video selectively here. Because I think, like, what is... hold on. Maybe I'm wrong. Hold up.
If needed, even implementing a mathematical apparatus.
What does he even mean by this?
Also, we should explore and take into consideration the political allegiances that occurred historically and the sort of opposition to the regime in question, the Nazis. So let's do that.
Now, he says we're going to evaluate whether these regimes lean left or right based on those criteria, but first he constructs a new category called totalitarian dictatorship.
I'm sorry, what? A new category? They are totalitarian dictatorships. Are you gonna argue that they were not? How is it a new category? As we look into Google Ngram, we can immediately observe that the term and category has been in use in all sorts of publications for a very long time. The reality is that Mr. A historian...
Okay, so this is actually something I also noticed when I was first watching. Fredda is referring to the mathematical apparatus part when he laughs, which is valid. What is he referring to? Yeah. The thing is, like, this is something that I also noticed. Is like, okay, you're talking about left-wing political spectrum today in America versus back then in Nazi Germany. And then you just ditch all of that spectrum and you just make up your own standard for how to judge things by talking about totalitarian regimes. The idea is, it's not so much that you have like your own definition that you made up. Fredda is going to go into how the definition is not actually correct, like it's too broad, even by the way Metatron defines it, to be specific enough for what Metatron wants to do with it. But the point is, you know, it's like you're like, okay, was it left or right? Well, let's talk about totalitarian dictatorships first. And it's like you're just framing the debate, the conversation, into like its own very niche way to support the argument that you're making. But if you were to actually like, define the left-right political spectrum, you don't start by just your choice to start from the position of defining totalitarian dictatorships is completely arbitrary. That's what Fredda is saying here, I think, but that's what I would say. The switch, the angle through which you approach the topic is completely arbitrary, and that's why it's a problem, because then you're just doing whatever you want. You're not doing history.
Would know that. A historian would use this word, didn't do his homework. Yet, he's always very quick to mock, belittle, and laugh.
What does he even mean by this?
Another testament of his...
That's like the one time he laughs in the entire video, and it's because you said something stupid with the mathematical apparatus. Because he was like, yeah, what does that mean? He's wondering what it means because everyone else is. How do you make a mathematical apparatus to determine the political spectrum of an ideology? It doesn't mean anything. But it's the one time he laughs at you, and all this is showing me is it really got to you. Baden Panana was absolutely right. Metatron has very thin skin. He really doesn't like that people don't respect him the way he would want people to respect him. Like, seriously.
Extreme arrogance. Man, he must be fun at parties.
Oh, I'll tell you someone who isn't fun at parties, I'm sure. It's Metatron. I don't know what he's like. I don't think he would be fun to hang out with. I'm sorry.
Fredda is confusing categories with working definitions. Historians use these as theoretical frameworks all the time, not because they are perfect, but because they are useful, particularly for comparative analysis, which is what I'm doing here. What defines totalitarianism? Centralized authority, strength in the military, militarism with resources directed to domestic population, authoritarianism and dictatorial rule, repression of freedom of speech and freedom of the press, systematic elimination of political opposition by violence, expansionistic foreign policies, and conquest through military might. Already note that all three historical totalitarian regimes of the 20th century fit very neatly within this box. Okay, that's a fact. So there's...
Okay, and this is what we were talking about earlier. The rationalizing. Metatron is starting from a position that Nazism, fascism, and communism are all the same. And so he needs a framework that allows him to put all of them in that box. You can say it's a fact all you want, but if you're trying to talk about the political implications, the policies, the reasons through which each regime achieved its own aims, why did it, and what it led to, and what was the reasoning behind it, then in spite of them looking nominally similar, you couldn't possibly say they were all the same. Fascism and Nazism were pretty similar. I think the only difference between Nazism and fascism that really matters is the concept of the Aryan race, because in terms of everything else, they were very similar. But even as brutal as the USSR was at times, pretty much throughout the whole time, the point is, they didn't have the same concept of like, you know, the purity of blood or the anti-Semitism. It was different, but the fact is, like, by having that box, he can just like dumb down everything. That's the whole point. It is the rationalizing that Fredda is criticizing him for doing. And case in point for that, think about one of the fundamental issues of Metatron's video here. Nazism. Is it far left or far right? Communism, as it was done in the USSR under Stalin and Lenin and all these guys. Oh, that's definitely far left. So Nazism is an open question. Communism isn't. And that's a pretty big assumption to make, isn't it? And I feel like if Metatron was itching this right now, he would literally go like, oh, well, actually, they called themselves communists, so they were communists. And I would just point out to that very section in this video where he talks about how North Korea, despite being the People's Democratic Republic, is not a democracy or a republic, and it's not ruled by the people. It's an autocracy. Countries, regimes, can call themselves anything, but what they actually do, what the word means, are completely different. You ask Marx how he envisioned communism, and communism as it happened in the USSR was not that. But again, his point here is, I'm going to fit all of them into that box, I'm going to rationalize the crap out of this, just dumb it all down, and now look at that. They all fit perfectly in that box, and I did not have to define what makes a left or right-wing policy. I can just say, well, look, they're all totalitarian regimes, they all fit this definition, and they're all here. Interestingly, there have been communists who have rejected the label of communism for the USSR elite, not just as a descriptor of their mode of production, but the ideological goal of the elite. Yeah, I mean, because the vanguard and like the autocrats at the top, you know, they didn't live with the same equality, so, you know, like there was still a hierarchy of power, which is contradictory to communism. Marx, when he time travels to Beijing in the modern day and sees the hammer in Seoul above a Gucci store. I don't actually know if that is in Beijing. I've been to Beijing. I don't remember saying that. Though, again, that was like 15 years ago. Left communists, for example, believed the USSR was state capitalist, not just economically, but ideologically as well, and qualified them as communists, like Amadeo I don't know who that is, I'm sorry. But yeah, that's the point. Like, I consider the USSR as like state capitalism. But at the same time, like, I like to think of it as like the way I've come to think of it is the way Professor Richard Wolff did. Richard Wolff is like an economist and a teacher who is also a socialist, and what he talks about is how ultimately many different people over time came up with their own interpretation of socialism. And to me that makes sense because it's kind of like interpreting the Bible. You know, the Bible has a message, but how do you interpret it? It just means there are so many different interpretations that it led to literally different religions. And it's kind of the same thing with socialism. You know, socialism could characterize itself as a form of state capitalism, but the mere fact that there are people who call themselves communist, who call themselves far left, who calls themselves socialist and anarchist, and that they can all look at the Soviet Union and be like, no, that is not what we want. And that does not align with our own form of extreme left ideology. And I don't think that's invalid at all to say that. I think what's very disingenuous is to look at the Soviet Union and be like, see, their extreme left-wing ideology, let us never substantiate that, and instead spend the rest of the video comparing the Nazis to the Soviets. I disagree with them myself, but the point is that the topic is more nuanced than Metatron gives it credit for. It is, but that's kind of where rationalization comes into play. If you're talking about history like that, these topics are way too complicated for Metatron to actually address them with the correct methodology that it needs to be discussed. And I say this as someone who has no experience, but I am positive that you are never going to land on the answer of whether Nazism is left-wing or right-wing in a 20-minute video. I wouldn't care what the content of the video is. It could be amazingly well done. You are never going to cover every single argument or evidence that you would need to make that conclusion in a single 20-minute video. Never gonna happen. But that's why you have rationalization. And that's what's being criticized. And I guess Metatron is you know, just doubling down on dumbing everything down.
No way. He cannot possibly disagree with these, right?
Okay, hold up.
Century fit very neatly within this box. Okay, that's a fact. So there's no way he cannot possibly disagree with these, right?
Going back to his definition of totalitarian dictatorship, it has numerous issues.
Why? Again, like, I just want to point that out, okay? Metatron says we might have to use a mythical apparatus. Fredda is going like, what does that mean? Fredda says, oh, there's some issues with that thing. Metatron, oh, look at my real authentic laughter. He said there's some issues. I cannot breathe. Yeah, it is true. It has issues. The framing is awful. And Metatron is laughing his butt off. He's faking his laughter before he even gives a chance to Fredda to actually say why there's issues. But the mere fact that he does that, like, the most obvious problem is that he provides no justification for the definition or even one item within it. Yeah, there's also that big problem. Like, okay, why are we using that definition? You never explained that. You're just saying, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it. Left-right is a historical syllogism. So how about we start from this definition that I'm just making up myself, and, you know, we start from there. Like, why are we doing this? Why is that the process through which we're analyzing this? Like, we don't know. That's just what he's doing. And then there's issues with this, and he laughs his butt off at Fredda before Fredda even has a chance to make his argument. And that's embarrassing.
God of Olympus, help us.
Imagine a brutal and repressive dictatorship that for one reason or another is incapable of carrying out expansionist foreign policy. By his definition, this may not be a totalitarian dictatorship because it's not invading its neighbors. Now imagine a dictatorship that does carry out belligerent and hostile foreign policy and even invades countries, but doesn't actually annex these countries, instead leaving puppet regimes in their wake. Maybe on the other side of the planet even. They wouldn't fit the bill.
Here is something for you. Go back, rewind. No, do it now. Pick up your phone, rewind, and find the spot while I was giving my definition where I specifically said that in order to be classified as a dictatorial regime, it must tick all the boxes I provided. And failure of ticking even one automatically disqualified said regime from the nomenclature. Strawman.
The only really good criteria.
Okay, so Metatron's argument here is that he never actually said that you have to match all of these to be considered a authoritarian dictatorship. But the point is that if you don't need to fit all of these, then you have a whole bunch of other countries that would fit within this broad definition. And so your comparison of the Soviet Union to Nazi Germany becomes a lot more irrelevant. You need, in order for your arguments to hold, you need your fascist Italy, Nazi Germany, and Soviet Union to all perfectly fit all of these. But if you're saying that like any country could be an authoritarian dictatorship without necessarily checking all of those boxes, then why aren't you making the argument that the United States is left-wing or right-wing while you're at it? Why aren't you comparing them to Nazi Germany? Or about Canada or China or Cuba even, if you want to go so far? You know, like right now, isn't Venezuela for a while trying to threaten Guyana from taking some of their land? Isn't that authoritarian dictatorship? Even if they don't necessarily fit all of these boxes? Are they Nazis? Which regime, authoritarian, one with 5 items or the one with 3 items? Yeah, exactly. How is the definition useful if not completely applied? Well, the point is that it conveniently applies for his rationalization, but if you're just making a definition up as you go, and then you don't need any given country to match all of these criterias, then you're just... then it doesn't mean anything. Your definition has been rendered completely useless by the argument that you're trying for the argument that you're trying to make. But I love how he keeps bringing it back endlessly to listing as many logical fallacies as possible. Oh, guilty by association, appeal to authority, ad hominem, strawman fallacy. Like, he's just trying to list as many fallacies as he can. My God.
Criteria on this list that is practically useful in any sense is, quote, dictatorial rule.
Criteria is plural.
It stands to reason that for something to be a totalitarian dictatorship, if such a thing exists, it...
Okay, hold up. I missed that.
And failure of taking even one automatically disqualified said regime from the nomenclature. Strawman.
The only really good criteria on this list that is practically useful in any sense is, quote, dictatorial rule.
Criteria is plural.
It stands to reason that for something to be a totalitarian...
Why? Why? You don't need to address every single thing. You're just salty. You're just salty as hell. That's what's going on.
Totalitarian dictatorship, if such a thing exists, it must of course be a dictatorship.
If such a thing even exists, when discussing history, I didn't invent the category. He really thinks it's a new category. This is ludicrous. You know what else fits? The fascists and the communists understand.
Okay, you see, this is what I mean. Like, he only sees communism with this picture and the hammer and sickle. And I mean, to the extent that they call themselves communists, you could say that's what they were, but again, it is so much more complicated than that. There are people today who call themselves communists who absolutely hate the Soviet Union because they think it does a disservice to what they actually believe in. Which it does. Like, the Soviet Union really wasn't good. We all agree on that. Stalin was horrible. Criteria is the only critic... is the only correct critic so far. Fredda would be devastated when he sees this. If he does a live stream or he does his own response, I am definitely watching it afterwards to see how he responds to most of that stuff. But I'm hoping it picks up a lot more momentum and that it involves a broader community to really make it clear to Metatron that no one actually takes him as seriously as he wishes they would. You know, it needs to be some kind of reality check here. Well, I don't think you can really call it a reality check because what this video tells me is that Metatron has already fallen off the deep end. I don't know how you come out from this. You know, before he got to that point, you know, I would think to myself, like, even if, you know, like he had like the full-on integrity to recognize all of the things, you know, I've levied against him, and he comes to terms with that, the fact is he would have to concede on so much that he would practically have to delete easily 3/4 of his channel from the past 2 years. And he would have to come to terms with his audience, he would have to be honest with them, and it would result in a massive shift. Your reaction is pretty insightful. You don't mind if I steal some points from my script? Not at all, man. Knock yourself out. And I will shout you out when you make that video. Thank you. But yeah, sure. I'm just speaking on the spot. I can't remember half the stuff I'm saying. But I do, you know, I'm thinking, I'm talking on the spot. This is the first time I do a live stream like this, so stuff's coming out. Anyway, let's try this again.
It must, of course, be a dictatorship.
If such a thing even exists, when discussing history, I didn't...
Okay, so if such a thing even exists, like in the context of like a dictatorship. So, what does it mean to have a dictatorship? Because the whole point that he was pointing out is that there are so many criteria in there that can mean different things based on how you apply them and how it can involve pretty much any country in the world right now, depending on what box you tick, depending on how you make the association. Based on that, you're not going to you're not going to arrive at a concise definition of dictatorship because you're purposefully leaving it so broad that it can also include any numbers of countries. A country where you know, the elite get to pay into political parties to have their votes sent across. Isn't that a dictatorship? It's not a dictatorship of the proletariat, but it is a dictatorship of the bourgeois, if you want to think of it that way. Isn't that a dictatorship? But then if dictatorship is like one person in power, one autocrat, or a series of autocrats, then maybe you can call it a dictatorship. But then if it's a group of people as opposed to one person, is it still a dictatorship? If you have a dictator who gets told by a few people right beneath him what to do? This is why, again, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about like the rationalization of history, but rather just the oversimplification that comes from the right wing, because this is what that is. It's an insistence on, again, like these facts being completely apolitical, completely neutral, but you only achieve this by purposefully stripping the history of everything else that makes it history. And then it just so happens to coincide with your worldview. In this case, the worldview being, well, USSR is far left, Nazism is an open question, so I'm going to compare the two and then stop just short of saying the Nazism were far left, they were merely authoritarian. Authoritarian centrists, you see? Which is pretty funny when you think about it, because if Metatron is a moderate, then that means that if he was an authoritarian moderate, then he would be a Nazi. He would just have to believe every single thing he believes right now, except maybe freedom of speech and democracy. Boom, you're a Nazi, by your own definition. Because you're a moderate, right? You're neither left nor right. So if you're an authoritarian, you're a Nazi. You're missing that one part by your own reasoning here.
Invent the category. He really thinks it's a new category. This is ludicrous. You know what else fits? The fascists and the communists under Stalin. Oh, you didn't like that one, did you?
It stands to reason.
I thought you didn't use reason.
Beyond that, the definition is so broad as to encompass virtually every nation on Earth. Most states engage in aspects of these things to varying degrees.
Alright, let me get this straight. Every nation has militarism with resources directed to domestic population. Every nation...
Yes. Yes, they do. To an extent. Did you know that... I can't remember exactly where it is, but there was a convention years ago, could have been in the 1800s for all I know, because it might date back to colonization. There was a policy that the countries of Europe that were about to colonize Africa had decided. And the system was that in order for you to own a piece of land in Africa, you must have military presence in that area. And to this day, there are still countries that function this way. There are countries where the way they hold their country is by having a recognized military. And if you have a recognized military, it secures your economy, it secures your country, and therefore, it's directing resources to the domestic population. You could consider that compared to what he's defining it as, it's a massive stretch, but the whole point is that the words are so broad that that's what they can mean. Oh, the Berlin Conference, yeah, it gave places like Angola and Mozambique to Portugal because they already had land there, for example. Yeah, and I think this is what it is, the Berlin Conference. And what they said is, you want to own this piece of land, you need to have a military presence on it. If you don't have a military presence, it's up for grabs. I might be paraphrasing here. I learned that when I was 13, and it just popped up. But that's the point. So how militarism with resources directed to domestic population, it really depends on how you define it. This in of itself needs to be defined, and it's not. That's why it's broad, and because it's broad, it can include any country, depending on how you choose to interpret the criterias. And the fact that Metatron himself says that an authoritarian dictatorship doesn't need to tick any of these boxes, it doesn't need to tick all of these boxes, only some of them, to be considered a an authoritarian dictatorship, then that's it. That's all there is to it. What about how the US has military bases around the globe? Doesn't that in of itself like secure the US's influence when it comes to doing international trade deals? Doesn't that therefore benefit the American population? Is that authoritarianism? Well, based on that definition, yes. If you keep it broad. This definition is like, it literally leads you to towards Jordan Peterson logical spiral. Well, what do you mean by strength in the military? What do you mean by believe?
Nation has authoritarianism and dictatorial rule. Every nation has repression of freedom of speech. Well, probably fewer in charge, I guess. Systematic
It depends again on what you mean by suppression of freedom of speech. You know, YouTube, during COVID, decided that they would moderate channels who spread conspiracy theories on COVID. They did so because of pressure from the governments, who said that, like, you know, like, you need to actually do something, and they started putting pressure on YouTube to do something. That could be considered oppression of the freedom of speech and freedom of the press. The funniest part is that this definition pushes the question further down the line. It does.
Elimination of political opposition by violence? Are you out of your mind? How is this even a counter-argument? How did this get into his script and he thought, oh yeah, I really got him with this one. His list is stupid because every nation is like this. And this is a fantasy.
You personally have to make an assessment of how strongly you feel that a nation has enough of these things to qualify. This isn't the kind of objective measure he portrays it as. To demonstrate my point, he says he'll prove that these three nations fit the bill, and to do so he literally just goes down the list and makes an assessment and says that they do. He does a little, quote, thought exercise to prove that 1940s Germany didn't have freedom of speech.
And are we sure? Well, let me prove it to you. Let's do a little thought exercise. You are in 1940s Germany. You disagree with Adolf Hitler's opinions, so you go to Berlin and in front of the whatever government building that they have there, you say, Hitler was an idiot. Yeah.
Honestly, this is something that I remember a comment under Fredda's video, and I totally agree with it. You're making a video on Nazism and whether they are left or right, and you're trying to do a thought experiment on what would happen if you go to the government building and you don't even know what the name of the building is. Like, it's okay if you don't know, but if you're gonna make a video about it, can you make the basic research of just looking it up? I don't even know if I can say it properly, but it's the Reichstag, something like that. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't even know the government building, but he doesn't need to make his point, which is, you know, why he didn't, because he's lazy.
Do you think you're gonna survive that?
This isn't how you work with history. You don't think your way towards an answer, you find evidence to back up your claim. His argument here is 100% reliant on your personal understanding of Nazi Germany, not related to any evidence whatsoever. His argument is compelling because you understand Nazi Germany to be oppressive.
Yeah, that's the building I was thinking of, but I don't know if I'm saying it properly. I'm definitely gonna butcher it. Like, if I was saying it my way, I would say, like, the Reichstag. But if I was hearing Three Arrows say it, when he doesn't say Reich, he said Reich or something like that. So maybe it's the Reichstag. I don't know. I don't even know. But yeah, that's what the building is.
And you're right, but he's not actually teaching you anything. He's saying, you believe this, therefore my point stands. This isn't history. He's pandering to you, and even though what he just said was correct, it is still pandering.
Oh, this is beautiful. He just said, he admitted that I am correct. Yet, he says there is no proof whatsoever that in Nazi Germany there was no freedom of speech. This is diabolical. The level of dishonesty of this guy is cosmic at this point. I don't even know how he has subscribers. Well, the ideologically driven, I guess.
Okay, talk about, like, completely missing the point. The whole point for that says is that even if you're correct, the way you approach it is not correct. And that's what he's talking about when he says, you know, you are rationalizing history incorrectly. You know? It's like, yeah, you believe this, therefore I'm correct. That's what it is. No. If you wanted to make that example, you could. But you could just, you know, show the laws that the Nazis had on freedom of speech. Show, like, what laws they had on protesting. You don't need to have a thought experiment in which you compel your audience to rely on what they already presume to know about Nazi Germany. How does one not know the Reichstag? Reichstag? Reichstag is political and Metatron is not political. Of course you don't know. But that's the point. He's literally like, okay, well, you tell me I'm correct, so there's no point here. How does this make it in your script? Are you kidding me? Like, this whole time, you haven't let him make the point. You would just cut through, make, you know, your own little petty insults, be ridiculously childish about everything that Fredda said. Finally, you let him speak for a minute, and he finally makes the point that he was gonna make. And now you're like, well, at the end of the day, what I said was correct. So I don't need to question how I do it, how I reach it.
Yes. Also, since he accuses me of pandering to my audience, whatever the heck that means, from a channel that debunks both sides,
This is such a... Again, for one, thin-skinned. Utterly, like, the only thing he cares about is how he's perceived. And he really wants to stay in control of that. This is why he probably hates Fredda so much because of this video. Because Fredda called him weird in his video title. And suggested that because he makes no effort, because he's dumbing down the very real process of doing history, then he should not be taken seriously. And that just really gets to Metatron. And that's why, like, every time he says, like, oh, you know, I'm being accused...
me of pandering to my audience, whatever the heck that means.
Like, again, this doesn't mean anything. Right-wingers got offended. Like, if you really wanted to go about it, you should actually list all of the videos that you say offended left-wingers. But the point is, it's not a question of who you offend. It's a question of what rhetoric you predominantly push. And I told him straight up about this one because he came into my comments. First, he recommended to me before it came out. He said, like, I think you'll like this one because it'll show you that I'm not biased. And this video here was embarrassing. Like the one, like, why did Rome fall? He was saying, like, oh, you know, I'm going to debunk this guy here, whatever his name is. He's this congressman from the States who said that the reason that Rome fell was because of the gays. And he says, oh, I'm going to make a video to debunk it. And what does he do? He just respectfully says at the beginning, well, no, he's incorrect. Now, here's 20 minutes of how Rome fell. And by the end, let's try and understand briefly why he made that claim. And what does he say about it? He says, well, some people have said that it's because he's a Catholic. That's what he said that, but I don't think so. Anyway, thanks for watching, Noble Ones. When you have someone like this clearly homophobic, this hateful, who says, who tries to blame, you know, the fall of Rome on something as stupid as homosexuality, it's a homophobic interpretation of history, and that's what you need to call it out as such. That's how you debunk the right. This was milquetoast as hell. And again, like, I would like to see, like, you know, university removes Anglo-Saxon module, decolonize the curriculum, whatever, like, those are all, like, low effort, and I guarantee there is way more videos on this side than on this one. These, at most, would be token videos by that point. Precisely so that when he gets the accusation, he can make a graph like this and be like, ah, see, I attack both sides. But you always only do those when you feel you need to strike a balance. You do those constantly. You got way more of these. And the fact is, they're all wrong anyway. Like, a lot of these videos, like, all your research is completely wrong. You don't know what you're doing. And it just takes the slightest amount of research to debunk it. But anyway.
From a channel that debunks both sides, let me demonstrate that it's actually a case of projection. He is the one who is pandering to his audience at the expenses of historical reality.
Why? Why are you, like, there is no need to go back that way. Like, you're just so mad that he would say something like this about you that now you're just desperate to throw it back in his face. If talk about the content, talk about the historical arguments, you're so desperate to just, like, try and discredit someone else because you feel slighted. Grow up. Seriously.
Also, I want you to notice one thing, because I did notice it since I made the original video, but you might have missed it. On this video, as usual, I attack arguments that are presented by both sides. He has systematically shown only those sections that he knows lefties would hate, but has also removed every section from my video where I said something right-wingers wouldn't like, but lefties would agree with. Such as, for example, the section where I say that just using the name National Socialism isn't enough as a criterion to decide whether Nazism was left-wing or right-wing. That is mental manipulation and...
Like, the thing is, the point that Fredda is doing is, like, he's going over, like, the stuff that you got wrong. If you're going over something that, you know, he agrees with, then what's the point of talking about that? I'm just saying. Like, he's like, oh, you know, this is mental manipulation because, like, he didn't say that. Like, you need to understand the argument, the actual argument that suggests, you know, that Nazism is left-wing, that it's because it was called National Socialism. That's the only argument anyone ever makes. The rest of the video... Ah, damn it. Hold up. The Amazon delivery. I think I lost my train of thought. The point I was saying is, yeah, like, this is something that Metatron really likes to do, and it's just like this constant hammering, insisting on the point that he's actually attacking both sides equally, and that if you're on the left and you're just mad when he attacks stuff about the left, and you only talk about these instances, and you don't talk about the points he makes when he's attacking the right wing. Like, the problem is that there isn't really actually that many right-wing points to talk about, and this is not something that I see in the video either. In fact, what I do see is that every time there's something that attacks the right, Metatron actually goes out of his way to try and make it about the left. One of those examples is when talking about, like, the racial aspect of Nazi Germany, how it was, like, super racist. And Metatron will say, yeah, you know, that's the type of racism that you would see on the far right, but, hear me out, guys. Marx was racist too, so technically leftists can be racist too. Which is a whole other problem on its own. But that's kind of my point. Wasn't that technically something that would have been an attack on the right? And you agreeing with it would have been an attack on the right? Why did you try and make it about the left? What were you trying to achieve with this? Can you tell me any leftist regime that did a Holocaust? Because if you talk about the Soviet Union targeted political opponents because they were authoritarian. They had famines, which is kind of on its own. I want to say political, I don't know enough about it. But the point is, like, yes, there was a lot of death, but it wasn't necessarily racially targeted the same way, or for the same reasons. Is there a left-wing regime that, you know, did a Holocaust? That's what I'm curious about. Again, like, this is just such a false equivalency, and I've been through this before. Like, I've made a video last year exposing Metatron, which is literally going over how Metatron targets the left versus how he targets the right. And the answer was, he doesn't target the right. He makes the right about the left. He makes it about the left, and then he attacks it that way. That's all he does.
Lack of intellectual rigor, if I've ever seen it. And I am the one pandering? This is embarrassing. So what this tells us is that these are not necessarily unique features of the right or the left, but they manifest...
Okay, someone who says Holodomor was at least partially ethnically targeted, it's possible. I don't even know what Holodomor is, so maybe I'm talking way out of my length here. But if Holodomor was, what was it? Jesus Christ. Oh, the Ukrainian famine. Yeah, it's the USSR, okay. But it's the Ukrainian famine, right? I mean, maybe it targeted Ukrainians more than Russians. I could see how that happens. But anyway, my point is that it's a famine. You know, it's not like a Holocaust where you're sending people to death camps. You just literally screwed up all the crops. You know, it's going to kill a lot of people. It's a lot of deadly incompetence. But it's not like racial purity for the Russian race type of thing. And that's what I, you know, take a bit of issue with.
As common ground on the extremes of said spectrum. It's the horseshoe effect. Extremes touch, even if, ideologically, when compared with communism, fascism is indeed right-wing.
Horseshoe theory.
Okay, like, there's Bogdan who came in and said that, but Bogdan, unless you were joking, you were also a tanky. So you said you were a tanky. So I would not necessarily take your argument on that either, but we're talking about it briefly. Let's try and stick to the video here.
Is complete bunk. It relies on surface level similarities between certain right and left wing regimes.
Even if, ideologically, when compared with so what this tells us is that these are not necessarily unique features of the right or the left, but they manifest as common ground on the extremes of said spectrum. It's the horseshoe effect. Extremes touch, even if, ideologically, when compared with communism, fascism is indeed right-wing.
Horseshoe theory is complete bunk. It relies on surface level similarities between certain right and left wing regimes in history. I don't think historians put much stock in the idea, instead opting for a more nuanced and holistic analysis that doesn't entirely sideline the ideological differences between these regimes.
To use your own words.
What does he even mean by this? What
So it just means you did not understand at all. Are you serious? That's your only argument? Hold on.
Metatron is actually observing isn't the similarities between right and left-wing extremes, but the similarities between two different regimes wielding state power. The reason I think that the horseshoe theory is compelling is that both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were ideologically opposed to democratic liberalism, which means that those regimes in many ways were both quite different from the ones most of us live under today. The difference from us, is something they both share, even if at a closer look the regimes really aren't that similar.
Horseshoe theory is not a perfect representation. It's better than anything this guy has tried to present as objective and true. You see, the theory is not meant to erase ideological differences. It's meant to highlight behavioral and structural similarities between regimes that claim to be opposites. Totalitarian control, cult of personality, censorship, mass surveillance, these can emerge on either extreme, and it's a fact. Fredda's mistake is once again conflating ideological labels with functional outcomes. It simply shows that when taken to their extremes, any ideology often abandons liberty and human rights into what could be considered a chilling historical pattern.
Okay, so I was really curious what he was going to say about that, and for once, I kind of feel that throughout this video, Metatron is kind of losing his energy to constantly hammer on everything Fredda is saying, because he's actually letting him speak more now. I feel maybe he feels more comfortable, you know, letting him speak after he trashed him for like 25 minutes, and, you know, something that Metatron would resent everyone else for doing, but I guess he's doing it, so it's fine. But, okay, so, horseshoe theory. So, the problem is that right here, actually, let me see, again, like, I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
That when taken to their extreme, it's a fact. Our surveillance, these can emerge on either extreme, and it's a fact. Fredda's mistake is once again conflating ideological labels with functional outcomes.
Okay, he's conflating labels with outcomes. This is what Metatron does, because he's conflating communism, the label, with the USSR. He's putting them together as one and the same, and he's arguing that if you strive to achieve communism, you will become the USSR, in spite of what communism at the root actually means. And that's kind of why it's you have the label, you have what it actually means, and you have the regime. There's three different things to consider here. And Metatron, by using the horseshoe, is not considering, he's only considering the label in association with the system that appropriated the name. And he's just saying, okay, well, you know, in that context, that works exactly the same. I have no idea what's going on in chat right now, but hi. So, this is the main problem. So when it comes to the horseshoe theory, yeah, the problem with the horseshoe theory is that, like Fredda just said, it's a very shallow understanding. It only works if you think of communism as the USSR and Nazi Germany and fascism as, you know, the far right. And then if you put them together, like, yeah, you're going to end up with a horseshoe like this. But it is true that the horseshoe theory, outside of that one niche way of using it, instantly falls apart. Instantly falls apart. Because again, there's communism, what it means, there's what the USSR did, and there's communists back then and today that did not associate at all with the USSR. So how does the horseshoe account for that? It doesn't. That's the thing. And this is one of the things we say, because like communism, ideologically at its root, is closely associated, for example, with anarchism. Their criticisms are different, but they essentially reach more or less the same things. So how do we reconcile the fact, for example, that the first people Lenin went after when he consolidated power were the anarchists? Shouldn't they have come together? No problem? How do we account for this? We can't. Not if we use the horseshoe theory. And that's really the point. That's why the horseshoe is completely bonkers. If you have someone who hates the state, wants to dissolve the state, wants to give power back to the people, who wants to make everyone equal, who wants everyone to have all their needs met, and on the other side of that, you have people who want to exterminate anyone that isn't directly like them, you want an autocracy that keeps everyone exactly as they should be, how are those even remotely similar? They're not. And that's why the horseshoe theory fell apart almost immediately. If you were to look at people like... One of the other ways in which it's also going to come up, and it's also the way in which I suspect Metatron is using it a lot, is he thinks to himself, when someone calls you a racist, they're authoritarian. They're trying to silence you, cancel your freedom of speech. Therefore, they're authoritarian. Therefore, that makes them like Nazis, who were also authoritarian. Now, of course, the big problem with that is that he's just whining. I mean, he's got a channel of almost 1 million subscribers. No one is silencing him. He says whatever he wants, completely unchallenged. I mean, he is challenged, but he still has control over how he accepts other people's challenges, because then he hides behind his editing. But that's the point, That's why this doesn't work. But it goes to show, this endorsement of the horseshoe theory is at the core of his video, because that's what allows them to fit all these regimes within the same box, and this is what allows them to then make all these frivolous comparisons. And again, I really want to emphasize this, but the fact that you would leave communism as an extreme, as it was done in the USSR, as an extreme left ideology, and just completely leave it at that, never explain it, never even consider the meaning of it, but then you go out of your way to make Nazism an open question, that's sussy. I don't know how else to say it. I don't think Metatron is actually a Nazi, but what do you think you achieve with a video like this? This is when we say that, when you're a moderate, you're just a right-winger, or you're just helping the right wing. You are not achieving anything by suggesting that the Nazis were nothing else than far right, because they are far right. That's where it goes. And I was going to make that point later, but I might as well make it right now. Actually, let's do this. Hold up. It's not the best way of looking at it. Can I just get the clear picture? Okay, there we go. Okay. So, we have the political compass. It's not great. There's a bunch of problems with it, and I made a video last year about why, in their attempt to map out every single ideology, it ends up being a bit all over the place, because by that compass, Hitler would end up somewhere in authoritarian center. It's complicated. But the point is, let's talk for a moment about what it means to be right-wing. I talked about it before, but when we're talking about right-wing and left-wing politics, irrespective of time period or culture, they have patterns, which is social and economic equality and social and economic... not your best video, that one? Sure, fair enough. And social and economic hierarchy, Hierarchies of power. That's what we get on the right. That's what it always comes down to. And, how do you see them? If they're... if you're promoting them because you think they're preferable or they're natural, that video had problems. Okay, guys, fine, fair enough. The point that I'm making is that, say you're someone on the right, okay? Whether you're a person who believes, for example, that homosexuality is not natural, but you believe in freedom, and you believe nonetheless that people should have the freedom to marry and adopt kids. It's not your thing. You don't think it's natural. but live and let live. Okay. The only difference between that person and someone who is, say, a far-right Christian who will send all gay people to conversion therapy camps, take away all their rights, and punish them legally for being gay, is that the far-right Christian conservative is taking the same notion of gay people being unnatural further. That's what makes him go further to the right, because the hierarchy becomes ever more like this. Yeah, I'm getting sidetracked, I'm sorry, but I need to talk about this because this is Nazi versus left or right wing, and I need you guys to understand this. It's going to be a laborious point, but I'm getting somewhere. I'm getting somewhere, I promise. But that's the point. You know, maybe you believe as a benevolent racist that your country should be white, or at least it was white at one point. But somehow you also believe, I don't know if there's a lot of people like that anymore, but somehow you believe that as long as people come into the country legally, whether they're white or not, they can stay. The only difference between a person like this and someone who wants a white ethno-state is how far they take the idea of how much they want their country to be white, right? So, taking just this axis here, okay, from left to right. You know, you start in the middle and you don't feel, no one is really in the middle really, but you start in this position where you don't feel either way about anything. And at some point you have to start taking a stance on something, and how you take that stance really determines where, hold up guys. So, okay, I'm trying to get there. The point is, okay, say you believe that homosexuality is not natural. Okay, so maybe you start here and you're like, okay, well, I don't really care. And then you go here and you're like, okay, well, they shouldn't be allowed to marry. They shouldn't be allowed to have kids. They shouldn't be allowed to display their lifestyle, as they would call it. We should actually send them into camps to be converted by force to become straight, without necessarily being in that order, but you get more what I mean. Normally, once you get here, you're basically at the point of we should exterminate them. Nazism is right here, in that sense. If you follow Metatron's logic with the horseshoe and they're neither left nor right nor authoritarian, what happens is you believe gay people are natural, but you don't really do anything about it. You believe they should not be able to marry. You believe they should not be able to adopt. You believe they should not be able to have public displays of affections. You think they should be sent to conversion therapy. You think they should be... Nope. This part here doesn't exist anymore. Once you go past that point, you end up right here. And the part where you believe you're wanting to exterminate people, you disappear from the far right, and you end up in the authoritarian center. You are neither left nor right. That's Metatron's logic here. And all it serves to do is distance himself from where his ideas inevitably lead. He doesn't need to be here and feel associated with this part here unless he actively chooses not to condemn it. But he does to an extent. The problem is, he doesn't like that it's on the far right. So, you believe all of these things, you take these ideas ever further until you strip everyone of their rights, but when you get to the point of extermination, you disappear from the right, you end up right here. How does that make sense? I mean, I'm going with my best interpretation possible of what Metatron is actually saying in his video when he reaches that conclusion. That's what this does. Hold up. So this is what I'm talking about. I hope this makes sense. Anyway, There's like 20 minutes left. I'm going to try and keep my commentary to a minimum because I keep repeating myself a lot. We got to wrap this up.
It simply shows that when taken to their extremes, any ideology often abandons liberty and human rights into what could be considered a chilling historical pattern. But once you start to look at this from the American political perspective, then the situation becomes muddy, if you will, necessitating a more nuanced item-by-item approach.
If you recall, early in this video, he said that one problem with this is that Americans are trying to apply their 21st century understanding of politics onto a 20th century European political movement.
Yes, I'm saying that.
And now he's saying that because there are differences between Nazi Germany and the positions of American Republican voters, the situation is muddy and Nazi Germany isn't entirely right-wing.
No, I'm not saying that. You absolute clown. I said we shouldn't call the Republicans or the Democrats Nazi. We shouldn't use either. They weren't neither uniquely left or uniquely right. And everyone watching even his manipulated version of my video knows that. He was accusing me of having manufactured an extra category to put them on. Totalitarian dictatorship.
Yeah,
and on that video I also say that the Nazi movement was considered syncretic, which means it has elements from the left and the right. It's...
Okay, the problem with that one line, I don't know if we get to it, but the line, syncretic, was used by Hitler himself. And it doesn't actually mean anything. There is one YouTuber years ago in Innuendo Studios who said it best. I'm paraphrasing here, but oh, and yeah, the ad hominem, like just calling him a clown out of nowhere. Are you serious? What a meltdown! Embarrassing. But anyway, the thing about being syncretic, as Hitler used it, meant that he was saying that they have elements from both the left and the right. Why are we taking him at his word for that? Hitler was a genocidal liar. What you need to understand about fascism and the far right and Nazism in general, and this is something that I was trying to make that point. Innuendo Studios, he said, when he was making his video on fascism years ago, he says, fascists, they're not democratic, they're not statist, they're not, autocrats, they're not monarchs. What they are is whatever puts us in power ist. That's what he used. And you can, if you saw the Jubilee debate with the fascists who talked to Mediasan, that's exactly what he said. He says, I don't believe in democracy, but we can use it to hold a vote, and once we have the power, we take away democracy and stay in power. That means he doesn't believe in democracy except as a means to an end. And Hitler and the Nazis, they did that the whole time. Most of their rhetoric until they got to power was about the freedom of the workers. That would make them far left if they meant it, but they didn't. They went full capitalist after that, and they crushed all the unions, and they put the workers under the boots of the owners, and they left them there. They're only syncretic to the extent that they lie. That's the thing.
All on his video as well. What a liar. Unbelievable.
And yes, the point is that Metatron, like in that moment, like you can see it in the video for yourself, because now he's calling Fredda a liar for making that point. Like, before you said it was a historical syllogism, and now you're in the process of going through American politics to compare whether the Nazis were left or right. That is what you're doing, Metatron. That's what you end up doing in the video.
Absolutely despicable.
Why are you looking at it, quote, from the American political perspective? Surely there must be better criteria than the political understanding of the median American voter. Full offense intended to the median American voter.
Oh my gosh, I have to explain the obvious. I am looking at this from the perspective of American politics and the general public precisely because oftentimes people will claim said totalitarian regime to belong to one side or the other just because they're using it as a way to insult people they disagree with. How do you...
But that's not just it. You don't use it to talk about the insults. This is a point you make in the video, Metatron. But that is what you're doing. You said look, I'm not saying... I'm starting to lose my train of thought. That is what you're going to do. You say, oh, well, because people sometimes use it in modern American political terms, then that's why I'm doing it. Okay? But you also said at the beginning that it doesn't make sense to do it that way. So Which is it? That is a perfectly fine argument to make. And you're just kind of like, well, what you're saying I'm not doing it, except I am doing it, and you're a clown. That's what's happening here.
Not see that. I'm focusing on what people are doing wrong. So how silly is it to ask if it's a good prism of evaluation? It's not, Sherlock. That's why I'm debunking it. Also,
But you're going to go over a list of policies and make it seem like that could lean the Nazis either left or right. You do that in the video.
Bias, an all-right mocking attitude towards Americans is very off-putting. I would imagine
You just called him a clown. What's not off-putting about that? Yeah, he's making a joke that Americans are idiots. I agree, Americans are idiots. Lots of them are idiots. They voted for Trump a second time, like they never learned the first time. They're in a cult. There's a lot of Americans who are idiots. The average American voter is not educated. It's a joke. And the best jokes are sometimes based on truth. And now he's gonna lecture him on insulting all Americans, and it's off-putting?
if you were to look at your analytics now, you get a lot of views from those Americans that you despise so much. Maybe you should be a little thankful and
I promise you, Metatron, when people talk about the people who watch those videos are not the American median voter. That's kind of the point. Because they're a little more informed, because they're a little more interested in that stuff. They're already, like, way out of that category. If they're watching that video, they are not the people that Fredda is making fun of.
respectful, since they literally make you money. A typical mentality of an entitled 20-year-old who once again thinks he's better than you because he could afford an education, and in his mind, he has better politics, more valid ideas. You see, the Nazis, for example, had nationalized health.
I mean, I already said everything. Metatron, your mocking attitude toward American is really off-putting. Also, Metatron, you're a clown. Yeah, exactly.
Government was deeply involved in every aspect of industry, so we're talking about big government. The Nazis were not in favor of free market capitalists, and, for example, had nationalized healthcare.
Okay, let's get to that.
Because he could afford an education.
Let's talk about the actual
and in
policies.
his mind, he has better politics, more valid ideas. You see, the Nazis, for example, had nationalized healthcare. Government was...
No, they did not. Germany had universal healthcare, which they started in the late 1800s, and the Nazis Nazified the healthcare by making it inaccessible for Jews, minorities, and people with disabilities, and people of color. That's what they did. Nazi had the left, if we're going to consider it like that, had a left-wing social program that was universal healthcare, and the Nazis made it right-wing. They made it exclusionary. So that's the first problem right there.
Deeply involved in every aspect of industry, so we're talking about big government.
Big government is another really idiotic term to use. If you look at the context in which big government is used today, it's basically just a moronic term used by the right every time they talk about a government program they don't like. Because, they will call healthcare big government. They will never call the military big government. It's kind of the point. It's an oxymoronic term that doesn't actually mean anything except as a word to say anything you don't like. But that doesn't mean big government means like big leftist policies necessarily. That's not what it means.
The Nazis were not in favor of free market capitalists. And yes, I'll defend this one in the next section. And all of this sounds left of center to an American.
And that's the point. That's what Fredda said you were doing. You are using them as examples of how the Nazis today in America would be perceived based on current American politics. You just did it right there. When Fredda says you're doing it, you are.
So, it is mixed.
All of this is, of course, said with 0 citations.
Was I wrong? You dropped it? Is it another one of those cases when you're gonna say I'm correct?
What is that? Of course, none of this had citations, and he's pointing you out for having no citations. And keep in mind, Metatron said at the beginning, like, we do use primary sources, we do our research, we have our team, blah, 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 blah. What's his answer to the fact that he has no citations here?
It is mixed.
All of this is, of course, said with 0 citations.
Was I wrong? You dropped it? Is it another one of those cases when you're gonna say I'm correct? On the
So you're saying it's okay not to have any citations as long as you're right. How do we know that you're right if you don't cite anything? How do we know you're just not making anything up? Part of showing that you do your research is to show your research. Metatron making that kind of argument would never pass a college class. You may have done it back then because he had to do it that way, but he's completely dropped whatever he learned in school here. That's not how it works.
following section, I'm going to present the characteristics of the regime, and then you decide where it leans the most towards.
As so often happens, these guys pretend they're just presenting the facts, and then they pretend to outsource that analysis to you. A historian's job is to provide analysis, not to say, you decide what happened, smiley face. They're being lazy, dishonest, and cowardly.
Says the guy who hides his face and doesn't tell us his name. Show me you're not a coward. Show us your face. Come on, Fredda.
And they hide behind this veneer of
That's all he has to say about that? May, was that what you were talking about? Metatron has become the master of ad homs. I need to watch this again. I can't believe this happened.
And yes, I'll defend it. It is the action I'm.
As so often happens, these guys pretend they're just presenting the facts, and then they pretend to outsource that analysis to you. A historian's job is to provide analysis, not to say, you decide what happened, smiley face. They're being lazy, dishonest, and cowardly.
Says the guy who hides his.
So, you're not refuting anything that Fredda says. You're just saying, well, you're a coward because you hide your face behind a... Do you know how many YouTubers, how many video essayists don't actually ever show their face? Like, I'll say this to myself, guys. There was a time when I was making videos that I used to show my face all the time, and then I realized at some point that actually showing my face doesn't actually make the information or the content that I'm presenting better. Sometimes, like even for just production purposes, it's much easier to just put on the mic and record in Audacity than to what I usually do for myself. I put a bit of foundation and then I get the camera right and everything. It's extra work, but it doesn't necessarily make the video better. I will sometimes do it if I feel like it, but there's so many essayists out there that don't actually show their face, and that's completely fine. But I wanted to address it, but the fact that this is all Metatron has to say about it, about the criticism that Fredda just did, is, well, you know, talk about cowardice. You don't even show your face. Show your face. Show your face. Metatron has completely fallen down. I didn't think it would be this bad, but my God.
Face and doesn't tell us his name. Show me you're not a coward. Show us your face. Come on, Fredda.
And they hide behind this veneer of objectivity to push impressionable people who are unfamiliar with the topic towards specific conclusions. In the following section, he doesn't cite anything at all, and for some reason brings up whether or not the Nazis had, quote, identity politics.
A central idea of communist ideology was opposition to private ownership of the means of production, which blended with economic intervention within the private and public sectors.
What do you mean a central tenet of communist ideology is economic interventionism in the private sector? A central tenet of communist ideology is the opposition to the existence of the private sector. What is economic interventionism in the public sector? That's already owned by the state. That's the public sector.
Now, to that, Nazism was different up to a certain...
He's not even responding? That was a completely fair point. Metatron doesn't understand. It was a mischaracterization of what... That made no sense. It was a contradiction in the way he described it. Are you not going to answer that?
To an extent. Let me clarify. Their overall economic approach favored big business and opposed labor unions, which of course doesn't make it sound socialist by any means.
All of what he just said is correct. See Adam Tooze's Wages of Destruction or my past video, Capitalism in Nazi Germany, if you want more info.
Did you notice a pattern here? He often says, what I say is correct. His own words, what does that tell you? It tells you that even though he knows I'm right, but he has to absolutely find something wrong because I'm a moderate, not a communist. And in his eyes, that makes...
Okay, so I get what happened here. The point is, Metatron lets him speak, make all of his points. And the point at which Fredda grants him, not grants him, more like concedes or says that like, okay, well, like this one part I agree with, or like he's correct. Then Metatron says, okay, well then, notice, audience, how in spite of everything he says, he then says I'm correct. He's trying to make it seem as if that one specific line about the crushing of unions, like that's correct, but he's trying to make it so that everything that Fredda said before that is also something that Metatron is correct on when it's not. This is the laziest, most dishonest framing that I've seen so far in this video. Like, the rest is childish, but there's childish, there's mean, there's immaturity, there's complete meltdowns, and then there's dishonest editing. That's what this is. This is a dishonest cut, and I'm calling it out. Like, I hope you all pick that up.
Makes me far right. That's all this is. Friedrich Pollock says, open quote, I agree that the legal institution of private ownership was maintained and that many attributes characteristic for National Socialism begin to manifest themselves, albeit still vaguely in non-totalitarian countries. But does this mean that the function of private ownership did not change? I believe it reaches far more deeply and should be described as the destruction of all the essential traits of private ownership.
He quotes Friedrich Pollock as to why Nazi Germany's private ownership was functionally destroyed, and I'm pretty certain he got this quote from the Mises Institute, which is also where Tick History, who I covered in the past, got a lot of his stuff from.
I didn't. Also, once again, guilty by association tactics. This is tiring. Please.
Okay, but if that's not where you got it from, then there's no guilt by association because it's just wrong. Just leave it at that.
Learn how to be a decent individual and stop using manipulation tactics. Not because it's disrespectful to me, who cares? You hate me, I dislike you actively, it doesn't matter. But it's disrespectful to your own audience. That is the very reason why you even have a social media presence. Have some respect for your viewers.
Okay, instead of just like moralizing after you called him a clown and acted like way more childish than Fredda has for the past 36 minutes now. If he was guessing that that's where you got the information from, if that's not where you got it from, then from where? Can we just get on that?
The Mises Institute is a right-wing libertarian think tank. Metatron, of course, doesn't cite this quote properly, and in this instance that is more important than you might think. For one, he actually misquotes Pollock, and leaves out the ending of the sentence. When you want to cut off parts of a quote that aren't relevant, you should indicate that you have done so. He does not.
By and large, this is a fair rebuttal. I should have added the parenthesis with the dots. That is totally fine, he's correct. I would have said if he hadn't done the manipulation thing a second ago. Still, it's not a misquote. It's a incomplete quote, since you're being pedantic. Misquoting is what you did to me.
Okay, but again, Metatron, the point he's going to make is that the quote you have is incomplete and likely doesn't make the points that you think it's making. Therefore, it's not just that it's, incorrect, it's that it's leading you to say something that's incorrect. And all you're saying is like, well, I would have conceded it sooner if he wasn't mean. Like, oh my god.
The full quote reads, should be described as the destruction of all the essential traits of private ownership, saving one exception. Pollock's argument isn't that capitalism is gone, it's that capitalism's management has been transferred into the hands of the state, while keeping the actual ownership and profits in private hands. He calls it, quote, divorce between ownership and control. It's conceptualized as state capitalism. I don't fully agree with that, but that's what Pollock believes, and it isn't quite what Metatron represents his beliefs as. This isn't the most important thing that Metatron leaves out, though. The most important part is that this was written in 1941, long before any serious historical appraisals of Nazi Germany had been undertaken, by the simple virtue of the fact that the Nazi period wasn't over yet. Even the economist writing here, not as a historian but as an economist, cannot hope to have all the information and data necessary available to him.
The fact that he's an economist and not an historian, when you're talking about economy, is a plus, not a minus, as he's trying to represent it as.
Oh my god.
Completely mute point.
What follows is an argument.
Okay, no, it's not a complete mute point. He's talking about how it's not just the fact that, like, yeah, okay, so he's an economist and he may have some input into, Nazi Germany, but the whole point is that he wrote this piece that Metatron cited, and to be clear, Fredda said where the source comes from. You know, it may not be from that YouTuber, but it's still from that same institution. It's still from that same other thing. Like, Metatron never disclaimed that. But the whole point is that, and I usually don't swing for this long, the whole point is that, like, by citing him in 1941, even that guy who could be qualified could not possibly know what was about to happen next, which is the massive revamping of, like, the much stricter control of Nazi Germany for the industry. That's the point. You just completely ignored it. Are you kidding me?
Meant that Hitler would allow private ownership and management of business so long as the businesses complied with the needs of the state. And in Metatron's view, this isn't really private ownership or capitalism. He calls this
Socialism disguised as capitalism.
This is central to his argument that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were cut from the same cloth. He says that Nazi Germany looks like capitalism, but is actually socialism.
Exactly, I double down on that. And also, you know what is capitalism and not socialism?
Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video. Surfshark provides a
Grab all that capitalist money and keep lying. I should probably have a little talk with...
How often is he gonna bring that up? I have never... How childish is this? My God. I think I made a hole in my shirt. I probably was already there. I don't know. I can't believe this. So he doubles down on it, even though it's incorrect. And then he's like, well, you know what looks like... How do you say this?
And not socialism?
He says that Nazi Germany looks like capitalism, but is actually socialism.
Exactly, I double down on that. And also, you know what is capitalism and not socialism?
Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video. Surfshark provides a...
Grab all that capitalist money and keep lying. I should probably have...
You can't call yourself a moderate and say stuff like that, man. Also, it's so... it's so stupid. Metatron, I will say this as a leftist who would like to see market socialism take place someday. We live in a capitalist economy, so irrespective of how we would like the world to be, we need to pay the bills. We have rent. We have taxes. That's how he makes a living, by making YouTube videos. You know who else does that? You. And you're thinking that, like, because he's more to the left than you, he can't do the same, even though you basically live in more or less the same system? It's literally like socialist but iPhone and YouTube. Yeah, basically. That would be me. But, this is like the most disingenuous argument that you ever hear from people who like to attack, like, socialists. Like, oh, you're a socialist but you own a house. Curious. Oh, you're a socialist but you have a car? That's weird. Oh, you have a socialist but you like your Starbucks? Really? Like, if this is all he has as a rebuttal, then that tells you all there is to know. Like, and the fact that that's his response, like, there is no allure of... There is no charade of even trying to look like you're an academic anymore, if that's the kind of arguments you're making. It's petty. It's just petty.
Have a little talk with Surfshark, by the way, with whom I will never work ever, considering they just financially rewarded someone with thousands of dollars for a video where he associated me with the Nazis, publicly. And to be crystal clear, if it was just a video...
Weren't you the one, like, super critical of guilt by association? It says, like, oh, you know, guilt by association fallacy. What are you doing right now, Metatron? What is that if not guilt by association? I don't get it. I think Metatron might just be a massive hypocrite.
Video where he disagreed with me, even vehemently, absolutely put the sponsor. Sponsors usually review the video before they greenlit it.
What follows is a very funny section that might seem familiar.
I agree with the last part, by the way. You can't be a socialist and like Starbucks. I think you may want to revisit that. Like, this idea that, like, what you might be talking about here is like maybe the argument of like there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, because this is what I would go for in this specific context. Like this idea that like, okay, you can't be a socialist and like Starbucks. What is it that a socialist would like about Starbucks? Their coffee, maybe? Because yeah, coffee is nice. That you can like Starbucks coffee and still be simultaneously in favor of, say, Starbucks having more ethical production, or paying their employees better, or treating their workers better. Like, I don't think these are mutually exclusive. But let's not get into that.
To some that have watched my old videos on What of Old Hist. These guys all use the same talking points.
What does these guys even mean? What does it mean? Look at the tribalism. Anyone who isn't a far-left communist like him is these guys.
Dude, he just compared you to What If Altist because you're both pseudo-historical idiots. You both completely misframe history, you both dumb it down, you both rationalize it in ways that don't make sense, you don't follow the normal process of historiography. That's why you made that comparison. There are right-wingers who make good, decent videos. That's not... Duke, that was what we real YouTube academics call a joke. I couldn't tell, honestly, because you said you were a tanky before. But listen. You got me 3 hours into my stream, okay? My wits are... I'm at my wits' end.
These guys. Alright, now I would like to dedicate a small section to race. With that being said, let's also remember that if you think that racism denotes right-wing position, then you would classify Karl Marx as a right-winger. And the reason I say that is because if you actually read the article he published in 1844 called On the Jewish Question, you would absolutely consider to be racist.
He claims to have read On the Jewish Question, but probably hasn't.
Hey, do you have a citation for that? Any evidence for that statement, mister? I need to prove everything, I'm super historian. Of course I read it, we read it in high school, for crying out loud.
Maybe, yeah.
Or if he did, he didn't really understand it. It was written in response to Bruno Bauer's The Jewish Question, hence the title, On the Jewish Question. Bruno Bauer's text is very anti-Semitic, and Karl Marx is arguing against Bruno Bauer's anti-Semitic arguments. Karl Marx himself was born to a Jewish family. To modern ears, much of the language employed by Marx and even the title understandably sounds shocking, but that's because we're viewing it outside of its historical context. That being said, there are examples of Karl Marx being overtly racist in letters, particularly towards La Salle, which Metatron could have highlighted.
Oh wait, he's not doing it again, is he?
Karl Marx undoubtedly harbored certain anti-Semitic and other racist beliefs.
Yep, I'm right again.
But bringing up this particular text is a very lazy and widespread right-wing talking point that isn't really convincing.
Now get ready for pure hypocrisy.
I would argue that Karl Marx was perhaps less racist than the average German man in the 1800s.
He just did the very thing that he has been accusing us of doing for this entire video. He used his own reasoning without any evidence to back it up to make us...
He just told you that in this book on the Jewish question, he's actually, speaking against anti-Semitism, which in of itself could suggest that in spite of his views at the time being pretty bad, they are the views for the time, and even for the time, they would still not be as bad as the average person. He just cited it, he just made an argument in favor of that using this very book on the Jewish question. Like, you just missed it, I guess.
Statement about people in history.
And also, if he's making that accusation, and you're saying, oh, well, you're saying you're doing what you said I did, then what's your argument now? That because you both do it, you're both equal, you're both even, that there's no hypocrisy, that you're both guilty of doing the same thing? But isn't that a bad thing, though?
Checkmate.
Oh my god.
But
Embarrassing.
that this also isn't saying much because German men in the 1800s were very racist. I won't belabor this point because the point Metatron is trying to make is silly. Racism is not an inherently right-wing position, and nobody sensible would argue as such. Anyone can be racist.
So once again, I'm right. And in fact, we could have agreed on this. Do you see the impossibility to have a discourse with someone like this, who just argues for the sake of the propaganda message, even when we could have agreed upon something?
I believe he's... saying this defensively, because he himself knows that racism is more prevalent on the right.
Not if you count anti-white sentiment.
In fact, much of this video
Okay, I'm just gonna let this thing go, and then I'll give my take on all of
can
that.
be viewed as defensive, particularly the last portion in which he gets very hung up on whether or not Hitler is a Christian, which I don't think is very relevant.
Who cares if you think it's relevant or not? It's my video, so I chose that section because it was relevant to me.
In the conclusion to this video, Metatron invites you to do a political compass test and try to imagine what Hitler's answers to each question would be, and then see where you end up. Once again, relying on your preconceived notions of who Hitler was, instead of actually educating.
To him, educating is brainwashing you. You're not allowed, nor supposed.
No, that's not what he said. The whole point is that if you're a historian, your job is to explain the mentalities of the time, to explain like what was the rationale. And like let people like have that information, but you need to present it still in the way in like the old, how do I say that? In the open, with the openness that it needs to have. The problem is that when you rationalize everything, you dumb everything down, you are stripping a lot of what you're talking about out of the context, and then with barely any context at all, because you're not providing much, you're telling your audience, well, what do you think is the position of Hitler? What if you go yourself and just use your preconceived notions of what Hitler stood for to try and see if he ends up on the left or the right? That's just not how history works. That's not what you're supposed to do. And I wasn't make a second point about that, but I think I have to watch it again.
Relying
to
on
understand.
your preconceived notions of who Hitler was, instead of actually educating.
To him, educating is brainwashing you.
Okay, so this is the thing. No, it's not what he's saying. Also, like, no, like, what is he even saying?
And then see where you end up. Once again, relying on your preconceived notions of who Hitler was, instead of actually educating.
To him, educating is brainwashing you.
Okay, so if I understand what he's saying that like the only way you can educate people is by telling them what the facts were, and what Metatron would be saying is that, well, part of keeping an open mind is to let you figure it out for yourself. What does that mean? I'm so, maybe it's just because I'm too tired, but like I'm not really understanding what Metatron's point here. But either way I look at it, it's completely ridiculous. The point is, when you do history, you don't just give a bunch of random facts completely stripped of context that matters and then tell people who are not historians, well, you have all these ideas, you have all these little things, these breadcrumbs of history that I just gave you, and you figure it out. How is that different from like all these conspiracy videos where they say do your own research instead of citing their sources? It's not different. That's the whole point. What Fredda is saying is that if you really do history correctly, you are going to have a bias of your own where you are nonetheless gonna come at your own interpretation, but you are presenting the facts. You don't rationalize them in a way that just happens to fit with your narrative. You need to have all the facts, present them in their full context, and I saw a new comment. This is really bad. I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't think I would be spending this much time on a video, but it goes to show that like if I do reactive content like that, I have a lot of stuff to say. Tyree could unironically pass better as this moderate apolitical centrist. It's good that he doesn't. Jesus. Point is, like, this is what I'm saying. Like, you don't just drop a bunch of random facts that just conveniently fit within that narrative that you are crafting for your video and then just stop short of giving the conclusion to what you're leaning to and just instead tell your audience, well, you think about it. That's irresponsible. It's not how history is done. And on the contrary, if you just present someone with all of the facts, that's not brainwashing. That's not propaganda. That's not indoctrination. What word did he use?
And see where you end up. Once again, relying on your preconceived notions of who Hitler was, instead of actually educating.
To him, educating is brainwashing you.
Okay, no, see, that's the thing. You don't... When you teach someone something, you're not brainwashing them, you are teaching them something. You are teaching them what the facts are. What would be brainwashing, in my opinion, when it comes to teaching history, is trying to convince your audience that history is static, that the facts that are presented to you as they are not only not up to interpretation, they can never change. They can never be challenged. They can never be questioned. Those are just the facts. And if there's any gaps in between, you make it up. That's brainwashing, because you're actively encouraging people to close their minds off to that one version of history that you just gave them. That's brainwashing. And if Metatron had children in his audience, I would call it grooming. No, I wouldn't. Also, I really hope no children sees this. This is not safe for kids.
You're not allowed nor supposed to use your critical thinking. Whatever you think you know is irrelevant and means nothing. Fredda's idea of...
The problem, again, is that Metatron used this critical thinking to frame the topic in a specific way that doesn't align with how you do history. Like, that's it.
Education is you sit down, shut up, and listen to your betters, meaning him. He tells you what you're supposed to
Talk about putting words in someone else's mouths. Isn't that something you kind of accused Fredda of doing throughout this video? Of just like, like inserting his authority? That's just what you're doing right now, just in the opposite direction.
think and what is correct, and you cannot doubt it. It fits in perfectly.
Oh no.
Therefore, Nazism should not be judged by whatever words Hitler crafted, and it should not be considered neither left nor right-wing, at least in the political sense. The only thing in which Hitler believed was accumulating personal power, and we have a name for that: totalitarianism. Thank you for watching.
To conclude, I'd like to read a couple of quotes from Roderick Stackelberg.
And once again, quotation after quotation after quotation. That's Fredda 101.
Metatron, if you want to make an argument for why him reading those quotations in this moment and reading those specifically, make an argument for it. But if all you're saying is, that's just what you're doing, that's always what you're doing, there's no attempt here to even engage with the counter-arguments offered to you, at which point I would ask, what's the point of making this response video? Because you're not actually, most of what he's saying you either purposefully misinterpret, or you just don't understand, or you are too busy gish-galloping and completely trashing and trying to discredit Fredda, that you're not actually engaging with anything he says constructively here.
Also, that's not a historian, man. That's not a historian.
I think Metatron isn't a very big fan of Hitler.
The only true statement he has made when it comes to my characterization.
And is understandably also not a fan of his politics and his views being associated with Hitler, which is why he wants as much distance as possible from him and his movement. Of course, no reasonable person is going to look at the Nazis and think that they were left-wingers. Not even Metatron thinks that. So his only recourse is to say nothing and pretend like it's nuance. I remember Metatron as a channel that did talks on history topics, but now it seems to largely be low-effort React content. And I mean lower effort than mine. I at least write a script.
And here is the, once again, return of the ad hominem attacks. This is a...
You called him a clown. How we should make a speed run, like editing video of all the times Metatron just attacks him. And just make a video out of that, Metatron and civil discourse. May get on it. Maybe I will, I don't know.
A perfect opportunity to show why Fredda despises logics and reason so much. What he just did now defies logics. But think about it. He's accusing me of being a low-effort React channel on a video that he made, which is a React video to me.
Rather, it's a response video that he took the time to research, and he's editing it, and he's writing a script. This is not what you would call a React video. Fredda is making a little joke there, saying that, at least like when I make videos like this, but at least I write a script. Yeah, it's still way more effort than anything Metatron puts into his content now. Like, by far. Metatron has gotten extremely lazy, and that's all it is. And the fake laughter.
The lack of self-awareness is unbelievable. Not to mention it's also false, because out of my last 15 uploads, 13 are my own original work. But as we just demonstrated multiple times by now, truth is the antithesis of Fredda.
And also, it seems much of it panders towards right-wing young men who are frustrated about video games being too woke.
Let's examine his language usage for a moment. This, that he just used, is a narrative trap. Fredda wants to frame all criticism of modern media as...
I'm pretty sure, and like I'm going to be speculating on the motivations of Fredda as well here, but I feel like of all the things Fredda has said, this is one of those comments he does on the side when he really doesn't care to substantiate that one that much. Like, if you want to talk about anything that's like an ad hom, to an extent it would be stuff like this. The fact that Metatron only appeals to young, frustrated white men who are losers and haters, and that they're just frustrated at everything that's woke now. And Metatron, like, coddles them by making videos complaining about everything that's woke. I feel perfectly comfortable making that same statement and not really have to substantiate it more than that, because I don't care. Because for all of the things, like, when Fredda gets to that point and he makes a comment like this, he's already demonstrated that Metatron is not really good anymore. That the way he presents things is misleading at best and purposefully misleading at worst. So when he makes that comments by the end, this is the point where he mostly treats Metatron with the respect that he actually deserves, after going through the content and explaining how everything Metatron does is completely wrong and lazy. You get to that point where you just want to say that, I think it's perfectly fine. But you know Metatron, like, if there's one thing you cannot let go of, it's the small jabs.
In quotes, right-wing rage bait, close quotes, when in reality, many viewers, left, right, or centrist, feel alienated by preachy, ideologically loaded entertainment media. This isn't the language that
Also, I don't read Metatron's comment sections enough, but like, it's practically a cult there now, right? Like, he's built this cult of personality around himself, and there are people who actually watch his content and think that, like, he's the Metatron, you know, he stands firm.
historian uses at all. Do you see now why it is very important to depoliticize history? 1. I haven't used the word woke in years. 2. My community is mixed, because differently from you, I accept everyone. They can be left, right, center, or apolitical. It doesn't matter as long as you're a good person and you're not toxic, you're welcome. The usual politics in games. And
I think one of the things also that, you know, I never really got into the bit with Karl Marx. I kind of skipped through it. I'm going to get back to it. But one of the things that I really despise is like this idea that, like, as long as you're not toxic, as long as you're not a mean person, Metatron, like, he is going to be dealing with a bunch of criticisms because he's got a big audience. He's going to have some hate watchers. Like, that's kind of just part of the game. But when you say, like, as long as you're, like, not toxic for who? Excuse me, my nose is getting clogged from talking too much. I don't know how that happens. But the point here that I'm trying to make is that, like, there was, for instance, like, last year, when I made, like, one of my last videos on him and I suspected he was going to talk about me in one of his live streams, which he ended up doing, I ended up taking a screen cap. I should find it again. There was this one commenter whose avatar was the Confederate flag, and he wrote a message to Metatron, which Metatron kind of just ignored through the chat, and he said something along the lines of, "Thank you, Metatron, for protecting the white race." And back then, you might have thought it was ridiculous that, of course, Metatron would not do things like that, but now he's on Twitter talking about how when this one place said they found a Muslim ring in a Viking's tomb, that now he needs to unite with his northern brothers. Europeans need to unite to protect the whiteness of the Vikings. You kind of just went right into that guy's rhetoric, didn't you? Even if you think to yourself that, like, you know, you're not making that extra leap, a lot of people perceive you to make that leap anyway. And that's also the reason why I said last year that, like, when Metatron did not explicitly call out the political agenda of Ron DeSantis with the curriculum and how they were playing down slavery, the reason he didn't call it out is because he knows his audience is actually much more right-wing than left. And he knows that if he called it out, it will hurt his bottom line, because he might have more people upset at him. And those are people who are going to unsubscribe from his Patreon. Yeah, he makes the leap all the time, but he goes out of his way specifically never to reach the conclusion of what he's saying. And let's finish the video, then a few more thoughts
And
afterwards.
the culture war. In this case, the battleground is Oblivion Remaster. Man, Elder Scrolls 6, I really hope they don't put politics. I really hope they don't inject a lot of politics in these games. If it's a tiny little bit, it's not a big deal, I'll mod it out. And I'm just being honest with you. I'm not being hateful. I don't hate anyone. Live your life however you see fit.
He says if you're gay, if you use they-them pronouns, if you've got blue hair, then more power to you, so long as you live your life somewhere where he doesn't have to see you.
The one time that he was actually showing a clip, he has to twist my language. I never said that.
Okay, of course you never said that, but that's the implication of what you're saying. You're saying no politics. Okay, so if there was some gay characters in Skyrim, would you complain it's political? If there was some blue-haired warriors, would you complain it's political? If there were some characters whose gender is, a gray area, they don't necessarily say that they're non-binary, but it's kind of implied. Would you complain that it's too political? That's kind of the impression that you say here. And when you say like, okay, well, live your life however you want, just don't be in my game, that's what it means. That means that there are people out there whose politics, whose identity, you don't like seeing in your games. Yeah, I never said that. What this says is something that Metatron is also very guilty of, like all the time, and it's plausible deniability. It's the idea that he will say something, but he says it vaguely enough that if some people call it out on it, he can immediately retreat. Since we're all into calling out fallacies today.
That's disgusting, Fredda. Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my favorite games ever.
Oh, okay. See that as well.
And more power to you, so long as you live your life somewhere where he doesn't have to see you.
The one time that he was actually showing a clip, he has to twist my language. I never said that. That's disgusting, Fredda. Final Fantasy...
Okay, so if that's not what you said, what did you mean? Am I supposed to just look at what you said at face value and not infirm any other message to it? What do you mean? What did you mean by what you said if that's not what it meant? Why aren't you explaining it? Because that's how it sounds. If that's not what it is, correct yourself. But if all you're saying is that's not what I said and it's disgusting that you would suggest I said that, okay, then what did you mean by that? What kind of politics would you not like to see in your game? You say it's okay if they inject a little, but not too much? Like what? Like what? What does that mean? It's a fair question. Fredda is comfortable taking it to the conclusion that it sounds like without asking Metatron first for a follow-up. And I think it's perfectly fine also to make that assessment because it's the kind of thing that Metatron does all the time anyway. Hold on, another phone call, Jesus. Actually, you know what? You want to hear my girlfriend? This will be fun. Hello, dear. You're on stream.
Okay,
Okay, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. And she kind of just froze there, but she likes her privacy, so I didn't want to put her on the spot like that. But yeah, that's what I meant.
Tactics
We should make a mod that removes all Italians from Assassin's Creed 2. Oh boy.
is one of my favorite games ever. That game is so political that it's insane, but it's not divisive. But it's also the idea of using the video game as a medium to inject your positions. That's when I'm starting to have a problem, because it feels like I'm being manipulated.
He's scared because the things he's seeing are different to what he's used to. He's not taking any sort of principled stance against people, quote, injecting their politics into games, because then he very much would not like Final Fantasy Tactics.
Here, Fredda, once again, insults your intelligence. Even if you're a left-wing fan of mine, are you really gonna sit down and let this guy tell you that the kind of political injection, whether you agree with it or not, in the modern video game space is the same as the type of politics that you find inside Final Fantasy Tactics?
Let me read what the original
I will say about that, and again, like, Metatron didn't actually say anything. He's not talking about, like, why the politics in this happens to be fine. He's just saying it's not the same. Okay, well, how is it not the same? What is it about the politics being injected into this game that you like, but what is it about the politics that could be infused into a new game is something you wouldn't like? And why would that make you feel like you're being manipulated, but not this game? I mean, the real crux of the issue here, and if you want like another, yeah, exactly. Like the thing is, like, I have to admit, like, I don't know this game, but I do remember reading in the comments under Fredda's video, and a lot of people were like were mind blown at the fact that Metatron would so comfortably talk about these games and the lack of politics, or the fact that they're not decisive, and people were like, whoa, you don't seem to understand just how fundamentally political some of these games are, and how actually some of them are very far left in their implications. And this happens all the time. Are trying to show you someone's perspective that's manipulative. Exactly, that's that too. You know, when artists make a game, it is completely their purview to decide what message they want the story to have. It's completely up to them. If you don't like it, you don't have to play it. But if the reason you don't like it is because you don't like the politics, then you really just don't like art, because a lot of art is political. And the other thing is, this is what I'm trying to say, is one of the main... what was I going to say? Another indicator that Metatron is a right-winger is that in this context, he seems like he has terrible media literacy. Because he made a video, I never actually watched it, but I think he made a video about how Warhammer Fantasy used to be better in the 80s. And I think all he meant by this was, back in the 80s when I was a kid, I couldn't understand the politics and I enjoyed it that way. And now that he's older and then people are discussing like the satirical elements of the Warhammer franchises, now he doesn't like it. He's like, how dare you tell me that the Space Marines in Warhammer 40k are actually space Nazis? I thought they were fun. You know? Completely missing the satirical element of it. And that's what a lot of right-wingers do. They just don't seem to get that the stuff they watch is almost always, political. There's always an element of social commentary in some of the art that we watch, that we consume.
Script, scenario writer, and editor's thoughts were on the politics of the game, published on June 5th with the announcement of the game's remaster. Quoting Yasumi Matsuno, "Nearly 30 years ago, the collapse of Japan's bubble economy engulfed the nation's financial institutions in mountains of bad debt, triggering a wave of corporate bankruptcies, a sudden and extreme rise in unemployment rates, and stagnation of Japanese society as a whole. It was an era when many were robbed of hope, when dreams were measured by their price tag. Against this historical backdrop, I crafted a story. It was the story of Ramza, a young man who fought tirelessly against the entrenched social class system. It was the story of Delita, who sought to take advantage of this confusion and despair to advance his own social position. It was a story of a peculiar destiny in which friendship and betrayal intertwine. And now in 2025, a time when inequality and division are still deeply rooted in our society, I offer this story once again. The will to resist is in your hands."
Irrelevant. This is a false equivalence. The kind of politics that is injected today is left versus right. The kind of politics that you...
What do you think class warfare is?
The kind of politics that is injected today is left versus right. The kind of politics that you just read here is up versus down. Up.
Who fights upwards, Metatron? Who fights upwards?
Versus down unites. Left.
No, they don't. You know why? Because if you ask a right-winger who's disillusioned with the economy to ally himself with people of color, to ally himself with BLM, to align himself with the queer community, they will actually side with the state instead to oppress them. This idea that you like, oh, you know, this is left versus right. Talk about like utterly not understanding the politics here. Oh my God.
Versus right divides. Furthermore, there is a difference between a game with inherent political themes and a game being used as a platform for present-day ideological messaging.
It says it right there. And now, in 2025, a time when inequality and division are still deeply rooted in our society, I offer this story once again. The guy is telling you right there that in spite of the game having political elements that serve the story, they are still meant to reflect our society today. He is telling you that the politics, the messages he had for this game, still applies in 2025 with the rise of fascism. How are you this dense?
And a game being used as a platform for present-day ideological messaging.
Yes, this game still does ideological messaging in 2025. But it's different, I guess, because reasons.
I never said all politics in games are bad, only that overt, agenda-driven injection of current politics can feel manipulative or immersion-breaking.
Okay, fine. Examples. Any examples? Any at all? Because the whole point here is that it's a message about the workers fighting against the rich. It's a very socialist narrative. It's very left versus right here. If you're saying, oh, well, sometimes, it's too obvious or whatever, okay, what kind of politics are you talking about? Because the guy is making it very clear. This was his intention. You can talk about, like, when he says, like, the will to resist is in your hands. You know what that sounds a lot like? That sounds like the last line of the Communist Manifesto to me. Maybe this director, this writer for the game, wasn't explicitly a Marxist or whatever, but he definitely believes in the form of class consciousness. Terry, you don't understand. The only good politics that are good in the once Metatron is too dumb to get. Yeah. I mean, if we always approach it that way and just say he's too stupid, then, we don't actually get at the why. This is the difference between an ad hominem and a counter-argument. You gotta explain it. But you're right, he's just too stupid. Although what I would argue is that right now, this is not something he ever actually thought about. He's arguing against this because he doesn't want to concede the fact that he never understood the politics. So what he's actually trying to say is, well, I always knew that, but that's not how I see it, so I'm still correct. But at the same time, he never actually gives us any clear examples. I will tell you, though, when he made those videos complaining about the Black Samurai in Assassin's Creed 2, you know what's the politics that he doesn't like. Because if the character is gay, that's what he doesn't like in there. If he's of color, that's what he doesn't like. He just feels like they're pushing a narrative on him, like he's being manipulated. That's without saying it here, that's what we know from his content. Anyway, almost done.
Fredda's tactic in the final stretch is clear. Undermine your reputation to undermine your arguments. He tries to make disagreements seem immoral, but rhetoric is not truth, and moral posturing isn't scholarship. In the end, Fredda's offers you a choice. Accept his interpretation, or be labelled reactionary, uneducated, or far-right. Yet, real scholarship thrives on civil disagreement. If the only acceptable stance is his, then it's not history he's defending, it's propaganda. I stand by my research, and I stand by the idea that history isn't a weapon. His videos aren't really about history, it's about control. Control over the flow of information, who gets to teach, who gets to think, and, due to the fact that I don't conform to his narrative, he made me into a target. Unfortunately, I happen to believe in something that Fredda, quite clearly, does not. The value of open civil disagreement. I believe that history is not a tribal
You believe in civil disagreement? What was this entire video?
battleground where you win points by calling your opponent names.
You called him a clown. It's like he wrote, this conclusion feels AI generated. Yeah, I feel it too. Maybe he wrote his video out of order, and he wanted to start his video by, being respectful, and he wrote the conclusion in which he said that, and then he made the video, lost his mind in the process, and that's what we have now.
It is an open dialogue, one that requires evidence, integrity, and a bit of humility. Fredda's video revealed a
I do not get any humility from Metatron, that much I can
pattern
say.
of logical fallacies, misquotations, ideological projection, and character assassination attempts. It's performative and cynical.
Bring up
What
the
are you trying to
Kishkara.
inject in my head?
Let's move on from Metatron.
Yeah, you can totally move on from me, but I'm not gonna move on from you now. More videos to come.
Okay, well, Metatron, I'm just gonna say this. If you want to make more videos on him, how about you just debate him? Like, at this point, this is what I would say, you know. Like, I make a lot of essays on Metatron, mostly because he won't debate me, so I just, you know, make the content that I can make. But, if you feel so inclined, like, you do live streams a couple of times a week, don't you? Why don't you just, like, decide a time with Fredda, and let's, like, actually hash it out? Or do you feel that you need the control of your scripts to control the conversation? Metatron got every guy in the team of academics to write this, but they were not allowed to talk with each other. That is an interesting theory that I think is interesting. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Okay, so that was the video. I had watched the first 10 minutes, and the rest we kind of watched together at the same time. Overall, utterly disgusting, utterly stupid. I cannot believe that someone like Metatron, like, even for him, this is someone, I think May told me this before I started the live stream. I said, even for him, this is a low bar. This is the lowest that I've ever seen Metatron, like, go down to. I've never seen him be so, like, even Ban Empanada, who was objectively far more rude in his video than Fredda was, did not even receive even close to the same treatment. All Metatron did in that video is complain about how Ban Empanada was being rude to him. You get a few comments from Fredda, or in there, like the occasional jab, the little joke or whatever. A 50-minute long response in which he called him all the names imaginable, in which everything he accused Fredda of doing is something he proceeded to do himself. Like, point by point. When it comes to something like this, there is way too much gish galloping for me to even consider, like, making, like, an actual proper, well-paced response video to something like this. There's just too much. But I hope this live stream worked out. The last thing I want to talk about is the concept of racism throughout the political spectrum. Now, I am not a expert in any means. You know, I give my disclaimer, so whatever I say now goes. His whole thing that Metatron does, like, and this is what I was talking about, this idea that, like, okay, well, yes, the Nazis were racist, but so was Karl Marx, therefore racism can be applied in every part of the political spectrum or whatever, apart from it being a dodge, trying to, again, make a criticism that would be about the right, making it about the left, irrespective of what Karl Marx actually believed interpersonally. We need to understand something, and this is how I see it, so I'm just going to present it as such, but to me, you can basically divide racism, as we understand it as a concept, into two main categories, actually. You can talk about political racism, and you can talk about interpersonal racism. Interpersonal racism is the biases that you have based on the experiences that you have of interacting with people of different ethnicities. And some people, in that sense, are racist. They will make assumptions about other people based on racial stereotypes that are not necessarily true. And when it comes to politics, this is when you want to politicize your racial biases. When we're talking about, like, law and order, okay? So we understand that, like, the black communities in the US are systematically, like, impoverished. What do we do about it? Well, if we believe that this disproportionality in crime rates is caused by the mere fact that they're black, then there's no real solution to that except law and order. We need to bring police, we need to incarcerate them more, we need more police brutality. Without saying it explicitly, that's what it comes down to. But even the politics of the Nazis, you know, it's not just someone who believes that, you know, the Jews are in control of the banks or whatever. Like, you are talking about the purification of the German blood by exterminating all the impure. That was the rhetoric used by the Nazis to do the Holocaust. You know what Marx actually said about the Serbians, who we disregarded very negatively, as well as the Mexicans, as well as black people, I think? What he said was, if you make the world more equal, if everyone has equal access to resources, if resources are provided based on their needs, then a lot of the problems that people will have will dissipate. Basically, he was a racist of the 1800s that said, yes, those people are inferior, but if you give them better working conditions and a better life situation, they will in fact improve nonetheless. Hitler would say no. These groups of people are fundamentally inferior. Their nose make them inferior, their religion, their ethnicity, their culture, they are intrinsically, fundamentally, biologically inferior. And the only way you can resolve this is by extermination. This is like the biggest difference between left-wing racism and right-wing racism. People on the left can still have preconceived racial biases. They can still exhibit them in some ways that range from microaggressions to just falling for old racial stereotypes. It can happen. Of course it can. But if your entire understanding of racism dumbs down to, well, if someone believes something is racist, then that's all that really matters. If you're a racist, you're a racist. It completely disregards the spectrum of racism, how people can exhibit their racism very differently. You know, a much simpler example I can think of that kind of reflects that is the saying, you know, like, I can't be racist because I have a black friend. Like, you know, a lot of people mock this, and it should be mocked, but I don't think a lot of people ask themselves, like, why? You know, the people who say that, you know, I can't be racist, I have a black friend, I have a black girlfriend, whatever. The reason they say this is because their level of understanding of racism is extremely narrow. They picture racism, they picture a person in a white hood, someone of the KKK, someone who's a segregationist, someone who uses the hard R, someone who wants to do a Holocaust. But the reality is that the vast majority of people are racist to a degree, just never to that degree. You know, if you end up, one of the that I would consider most insignificant ways that someone could be racist, that they don't realize they're racist, and that is on a larger scale kind of inconsequential but still ultimately racist, is when you say, well, this black person looks like this other black person. 99% of the time that a white person looks at two black people and say they look alike, they don't. And I'm guilty of that. I've done that too in the past. But what it kind of implies is that for you, black people tend to all look the same. That doesn't mean that you're going to want to do a Holocaust. That doesn't mean you want to oppress black people. You could actually recognize systemic racism. You could have policies that you push for, that you want to solve it, but that doesn't mean that you are completely immune from having some biases of your own. And the way I would approach that personally is that it doesn't really matter. A lot of people on the right look at this kind of rhetoric and they think to themselves, okay, well, this is just like anti-white hatred, like self-hatred. You know, you are white, you're talking about this, and it just means that you hate yourself. You hate yourself for being white, you hate yourself for the history of what all white people have done. And no, I think it's just about being able to acknowledge it. If you can acknowledge it and you can acknowledge it's a problem, then you just go from there and, you know, you do the effort. It ends there. Like, no one is going to make you feel guilty for being white, for having these small tendencies. It's just about recognizing them. But anyway, so yeah, that's why I say, like, his understanding of Karl Marx and the Nazis and trying to put them two together shows both a complete lack of understanding of what racism actually entails, and a willingness to look at something like the Holocaust and be like, well, technically, since the left can be racist too, that's what I need to point out right now, to be a moderate. So with that, like, I'll check if Fredda has any response. I know Shadiversity made his own video. I do not intend to watch it. I don't even cover Shadiversity on my channel anyway. But that'll be it. Like, we're closing in on almost 4 hours. This took way too long. But since I made it, I'm probably going to cut it and make my own clip that's going to be at least a little shorter. And that's where it's at. So thank you all so much for anyone who stopped by. This actually turned out, in spite of my relatively small subscriber count, this turned out to be a very good stream. We didn't actually have we didn't really have like a whole lot of people tuning in, but the people that did tune in, they would stick around for a while. The average view duration on my live stream is 30 minutes. Wow. you know, maybe I would get like twice as many views on my main channel, but most people would tune out after 5 minutes. The fact that people tuned in for so long, I really appreciate it. The only sad thing now is that my channel can't reach monetization, otherwise I would ask you guys for super chats. But that's about it. So since now I've set it up to live stream on my second channel, I might do more live streams in the future. We'll see. Definitely easier than writing a lot of essays constantly. But anyway, thank you all so much, everyone, and I'll see you next time.